Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Let Loose podcast, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Winter Challenge and the Pokemon TCG. I'm your host, Jeff Beisch, and we're joined by our first repeat offenders here, and Z-Man Waffles. What's up, guys?
Hey, how are you doing? Pretty honored to be the first repeat.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, we're glad to have you guys back. People loved the Colorless and Psychic episodes. Lots of debates. People still really mad at Marshadow. Most people seem to agree with you. Are there colorless dissenters still? Of course. But you know what? I think Marshadow, people tend to agree with you guys on the toxicity of Marshadow. So that's where we're at.
I knew something was right once Tricky Jim also started ranting about Marshadow. That's when I realized, okay, when the creator of the format is also getting Turn 1 Marshadowed, things might actually change. This is great.
And he loves to play Marshadow. Psychic Mahone was what I used to call the traditional Psychic list. So, that was my first intro to Marshadow. So if he's saying it needs to be banned, maybe it does. But I'm going to keep playing it till it's not allowed.
Of course.
You can't not play it.
Sorry, little Timmy. I'm still going to tell you to go second, and Marshadow, you turned 1.
Poor Timmy. Poor Timmy.
I gotta say, it's like SNL, where once you're the guest 3 or 5 times, you kind of hit like a different level. This is great. Being the second guest, I'm sorry, all other GLC people, we're already getting into that 3rd or 5th echelon. This is great. I feel like honorary SNL guest.
Nice. We'll have to get you guys a jacket or a coat or something and send it back to you guys from there.
I got my Pikachu jacket on right now, of course.
Nice. Well, today's episode, all about new cards coming out, which I love to talk new cards. So we're going to be talking Twilight Masquerade, which, we just had Temporal Forces. I didn't feel like Temporal Forces added a whole bunch. What about you guys? Temporal Forces good?
I have to remember, what was the big thing from that?
I don't know.
Buddy Poffin.
Metal deck got a huge. Buddy Poffin was huge.
Yeah.
And Metal Maker was pretty huge too.
Yeah. Not a lot really outside of that. Like you guys, I'm kind of struggling to think about what impact Temporal Forces had on the Gym Leader Challenge format. And Buddy Poffin's a great card. Most decks are playing Buddy Poffin, but beyond that, don't know. Failing to recall. So I'm thinking that Twilight Masquerade's going to be a little bit better. I don't know. It's not going to be as big as Paradox Rift, because 2 sets ago, Paradox Rift was kind of game-changing. But I do think Twilight Masquerade is going to have some playable cards, and definitely going to change maybe what some types look like going forward.
I think it'll change a lot on maybe not the competitive side of GLC, which is okay. I enjoy GLC the most when I don't think about it in competitive terms. But I think the options for brewing have diversified, which is really exciting. Paradox Rift is really tough to follow up. I even felt for Standard, that was the rebirth of a lot of concepts. I know the Pokemon Company said that starting with Paradox Rift, that's when they want to be able to come back, come from behind kind of mechanic with cards like Iono, Counter Catcher, which of course we had the ladder already in Standard, but having essentially 2 ends, and Iono is even better than N since you can control where the cards are placed in your deck. That set's so hard to counter. I mean, Reversal Energy is up there, but having Buddy Poffin really has been huge. I'm a very greedy deck builder. I'll have Battle VIP pass in most decks. I have started to cut down on it recently because Buddy Poffin does afford me that space to be able to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Some decks you have 2 of them though too. You have both.
That's true. There's a lot of decks I have both. I'm still greedy. I'm sorry, Waffles.
Well, greed is good. I'm in the opposite phase in life right now. I'm like, I need my decks to be consistent. I want to play the game every time I sit down. Like, that's my goal. Is I don't want to sit there for 15 minutes watching my opponent just play all the cards while I'm like, yeah, attach pass. It's sad. That's where I'm at. But I do think, like you mentioned, Twilight Masquerade is going to open up a lot of brewing potential. Whether or not decks can break through into like the competitive scene is another matter. But there's a lot of fun cards to look at. Let's get into it. I got to give a shout out to Justin Basil. Took a lot of his translations and stuff. I don't know what it is about Pokemon in general. It's just really hard to find set releases in one spot. Until the cards actually release. I don't know if that's intentional by TPCI, but Justin Basil's got us covered. So a lot of translations and a lot of cards I use from his website. So huge shout out to him. And he was gracious enough when I messaged him to be like, yeah, I do it. Just make sure you give me credit. And here is his credit. He deserves
Oh,
it.
definitely.
Actually, I want to give a personal shout out to. I played one of the people on the Justin Blazel team when I was at NAIC. He was playing this really cool Clefly and Quaxoladle. How do you say the new Peacock Waterbird deck? Quaxel. Doesn't matter. He was one of the chillest, coolest opponents I've ever played. So great group of guys, and love the resources that they do.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let's get into it. We're going to start with grass.
Oh yeah.
Grass, I'm not sure if grass got a ton that are going to make any archetypes like different, but it's definitely got some neat cards. One or two of these cards I think is going to get shoved in almost every single grass deck. And then from there, there's going to be a lot of options for people to have. But we had to start off with, the Rillaboom line, which is huge in grass because the Rillasaur decks are some of the most competitive grass decks and some of the most played grass decks too, because it has a ton of starters in it. But in Twilight Masquerade, we're probably getting the optimal starter here with our Groki. Does the same energy requirements as the ones that people was previously playing, but it does 10 more damage with its branch poke attack than the other one. So it's just a 10 damage upgrade, but this is your new optimal Groki.
A cuter art and a better
Yeah.
attack name. I would rather branch poke someone than scratch them or something.
But if you're branch poking someone, you're not in a good spot. Let's be honest. Like, this is not an attack you want to be using.
That's true. Fortunately, they both have one
Thumbs up.
retreat. So yeah, pick whichever art you like better. Go from there.
Buddy Poffin searchable.
Exactly. The next card, the Thwacky. The Thwacky things get a little bit more interesting. So before, people were playing Lay of the Land Thwacky that had 90 HP. It did have Branch Poke Attack, which we just mentioned. But the Lay of the Land ability is pretty sweet. If you have a stadium in play, it just had no retreat cost. So if you were stuck in the active, just plop down Turf Field and all of a sudden you had free retreat. So this Thwacky's going to be hard to beat. So we got the new Thwacky with the Boom Boom Drum ability. And it says that once during your turn, if your active Pokemon has the Festival Lead ability, you can just search your deck for any card and put it into your deck. So interesting, but we've got 100 HP, which makes it not level ball searchable. And there is a caveat to go along with this ability of having a Pokemon with a Festival Lead ability, which in the next slide we'll talk about, which is the Diplin. I think the Diplin is the one that people are going to be playing in grass. It has to do the Wave ability, which is a callback to the original Wigglytuff and base set, who had the same exact attack.
Oh, wow.
It was, I think, 3 colorless energy was its cost, but it had this same exact attack. So I'm a big fan of it for the fact that it just has that base set attack. But Do the Wave does 20 times the amount of bench Pokemon you have. Grass loves a full bench, but this is still only 100 damage max, right? Now, Festival Lead here, which is the ability that the Thwacky needs in order to search up any card, basically lets this Pokemon attack twice, but only with attacks that it has. So it can do the wave, but it can't do any other attack twice, so you can't get fancy with TMs. Then you're throwing that with Festival Grounds, which you have to have for Festival Leave to be in effect. And it basically just says, like, hey, any Pokemon with energy can't be affected by special conditions. And if they are, remove them. So not the best stadium. So a lot of things have to go on to make this Thwacky kind of usable.
Right.
And to get the full value of it sticking to. I guess not full value, because if you think of something like La Perfume from Roserade, that's only once per turn. But the argument I've heard sometimes that I'm not sure I agree with is that you can cut Roserade for these cards, and I worry about that.
I don't. Yeah, there's no way you cover his rate for these cards. Like, especially with this, it's all being based on a stadium, which is just gonna get knocked probably next turn anyway. I don't. I really wish this worked out because I really like the idea of it. I just don't see it actually being functional.
I think it's going to take some reimagining, because the other problem I have with it is I don't really want to play Guzma Hala in the kind of the standard grass. I should give a disclosure. We should give a disclosure. We don't play standard grass. We play tank and heal. That's actually what we think is the best grass deck, to be honest. So we actually don't play Rillaboom, but we're familiar with it, of course. When we were starting out, like most people, that's the deck we started out with. But we like to play Torterra with Arboliva, Pot Helmet, Luxurious Cape, and just it never dies. It's a big turtle that destroys everything. But with that said, I feel like in Rillasaur, you really like to have all basic grass. So you don't typically play Guzma Hala. There's a new Colress card that's coming out in the next set and that will help you find a stadium. But that's a little bit of where I think maybe you need Rosary to find the festival grounds or things like that. And I kind of worry about the synergy of it. I don't think you can easily just put it right into Real Sword, but I think a creative deck builder will be able to find a way to make this work in a similar way that there's some rogue jump bluff decks. I was actually trying to make up a jump bluff deck earlier today, and I'll be messing with this Thwacky a little bit next week. Actually, once our cards come, to be able to see, okay, what are some cool things you can do with this? Because attacking for 100 twice, it isn't nothing, but it is a lot of setup.
Yeah. Well, and it's mitigated by the fact that it does only cost one energy. So if we're looking at Diplin here, it is only one energy. So that's not too bad. Grass loves to have a full bench. Again, in fact, parallel is one of the best things against grass. So having a full bench is something you expect grass to have. But like you mentioned, it's just it's not a lot. Like you don't have another festival lead Pokemon. So you're counting on this Diplin to work with your Thwacky in a singleton monotype format. It's just a lot to have happen in a type that doesn't consistently have Pokemon draw, or the Pokemon draw that it does have, they don't play. Like a lot of decks aren't going to play the Beautifly just because it's a stage 2 and you just got better options. So I think the biggest thing working against this is honestly Thwacky having 100 HP. Like if it was 90 HP and level ball searchable, it would be so much better in my opinion. Obviously, you still have Groddle to search things out, but I'm going to keep playing Lay of the Land Thwacky. I don't think Boom Boom Drum, no matter how sweet the name might be, is good enough for GLC, at least in a competitive sense.
In a competitive sense, I agree. I am curious to see what people do to build around it. And I don't want to be a broken record because I think I'm going to be saying that a couple times. But I do think this is going to be, on paper, maybe look similar to Rillasaur, but actually, in terms of piloting, be a little bit different of the way that you route some of those early turns if you want to make this work.
Yep, agreed. Well, all right, some grass Pokemon, and I can never remember which is which. I think this is the Illumise, and I might be saying
I
it
think
incorrect.
so.
Yeah, and so these have actually some pretty interesting attacks, and pretty interesting like setup attacks going on here. So this one has the slowing perfume attack, and you can only use it if you're going second. It costs one colorless energy. So if you're going second during your first turn, you can just shuffle one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all attached cards back into their deck. So it's pretty sweet. Obviously, it's pretty well thought out because you can't just donk your opponent by switching the active back into their deck. It's got to be basic on the bench. So kind of funny. Like your opponent, like maybe goes
Yeah.
Basculin and tries to put something on the bench to get set up next turn, and you're just like, put that Sobble back into your deck, and you can put your opponent behind. But of course, then you're stuck with this card in the active as well. So interesting. I don't know. What are your thoughts, C-Man?
It's a trade-off because it also doesn't evolve, so it's stuck on your bench. And if you're playing a Torterra build, you want death cards to be able to evolve. So this probably doesn't go into there. Funny is exactly the word for it, and interesting. I like cards like this because, to my knowledge, there's nothing else in our format that's like it. So it's one of those things when a new set comes out, even if there's not an applicable use right now, I think it's good to pick one up and then think about it because there's nothing else that's quite like it. And sometimes I like going to card shops and just sort of looking through bulk because even if a card is older, it'll kind of catch my eye of like, oh, I never thought of it this way. So this is one of those things that it is just kind of interesting and something to keep in mind. But I don't see an immediate use for it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Interesting, fun, casual. Those are the words. I want to play
Yeah.
this card at some point at my locals and just be like, put that back in your deck. But knowing that it's
Right.
not going to
You
be
have that
good.
friend that's like, oh, I had such a dead hand by a Basculand out the Remoraid. It's okay, I have Octillery. And you're like, all right, buddy, well, here's my Illumine. Shuffle back in the Remoraid. It's a situation that's never going to happen, but in my head, it's a great one.
Right, right. Well, the other one here, Volbeat, is also interesting. So, for one colorless energy, again, you have the fast sign attack. If you go first, you can use this attack during your first turn. So, it's one of those, breaks the rules cards. You can search your deck for two basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. So, it's a Basculin that costs an energy, but you can do it on your first turn. Again, it breaks the rules of not being able to attack. It's interesting.
This one I actually think is good. Are you going to find the deck space for it? That becomes the real question. And ultimately, that might be no. It might be a 61st card. But probably further down, probably like a 65th card, if I'm being honest. But shiny new toy alert. This is something I'm honestly going to try out. We were talking in the beginning of the podcast. I am someone that likes to play Battle VIP Pass alongside my buddy Poffin. I think as item cards and search cards and grass have become pretty plentiful. This is something that's interesting because it's a it's one of those things that the space that it takes up, if you get it off, it's worth getting it off. So meaning like if you go first, which let's go into statistics, it's only 50% of the time. Let's say you play like 8 basics, like you have a decent chance of starting it. But a lot of grass stuff has a lot of search. So the advantage of being able to get two things onto your bench right away, the trade-off for that might be worth the deck space. And then this is where I'm going to go really crazy and people are going to disagree. Maybe if you play this and Battle VIP, you play Battle Compressor and just kind of like have something to kind of thin things out. That's probably a little bit off the wall, but it is something that if you want to start messing around, because things like Rullisaur haven't really changed much in 2 years. So I think a lot of us are trying different things. This is something to try. And I think that's how I feel about some of the other cards that we'll talk about. But it breaks the rules. There's nothing else like it. I actually do think it's a good card. Just is it good enough? That's something that some time and testing will tell. I think probably not, but maybe, just maybe.
Yeah, and I think you have to think of like what grass has at its arsenal when you're looking at this card too and evaluating it. Because we mentioned Torterra already. Torterra's attack is boosted by evolution Pokemon. So if you got this down, you're not increasing Torterra's attack to a certain degree. Cricketune already, which you're playing with Cricketot. The Cricketot lets you search up to 3 Pokemon. Zarude has Pack Call, which lets you search up Pokemon, but both of those go to your hand. So this puts them on the bench, but those other two have a little bit better, I don't know, utility with them when it comes to what grass can do. Now, adding a scoop up net, I love to play scoop up net in my grass deck just because of Roserade. Like
Oh yeah.
put down, Roselia, Evolve and Roserade, do it again. So like maybe scoop up net or another item card that lets you switch out. Like maybe that makes this Volbeat playable. When I see this card, the biggest thing I hope is that they go back and they change Wally, because Wally used to have this same text that would let it break the rules, and then they changed the supporter rule after that. So if they fixed Wally, or at least let Wally break the rules because of this, that would be really cool. And I think evolution decks would get a lot better in Gym Leader Challenge as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they went the other way around. They nerfed Wally with Salvatore, and then it opened up a whole other can of worms that would take an entire podcast to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they nerfed Wally, honestly. I guess I do understand it actually from a standard standpoint. It's not like Salvatore's making waves there either. It'd be interesting. I like rule breaking cards. I think it's always worth to have them, and then to kind of be able to try them out as things develop. The other thing I want to give an honorable mention to is we do have Gossifleur. I actually do personally play Eldegoss and Gossifleur because that one has a call for family for 3, which feels broken to me.
Yeah. Grass has,
That
again,
doesn't
grass.
break the rule. You cannot use it going first.
That's true. And grass has a lot of options, and that's the deal. Like it has a lot of Pokemon search. If there's one thing you're going to say about grass, is it's going to search its Pokemon out unless you can stop it. Next card, you mentioned Take and Heal. So we're going to throw this Tangrowth out there. And this Tangrowth has the Jungle Body ability, which lets it take 30 less damage. So it's 150 on a stage 1, effectively 180 HP with this ability. Then the attack isn't that bad. I mean, it's grass and 2 colorless for an attack that does 150 damage minus the damage counters on it. So it's one of those Pokemon, the more it gets hurt, the less damage it does. But if you're playing a take and heal strategy, like, this might be, Mal and Lana heal it up and then attack back in. And it plays pretty well with a card that was recently released in Brambleghast, who has the exact same attack cost. So if you're looking to play double colorless energy and grass, these two might go side by side. But another stage 1 in Brambleghast that gets 50 more HP for each prize card that your opponent has taken. So there's kind of like a shell that maybe they're trying to put out there already.
Yeah, I think this card's hilarious. I am definitely going to try to build a deck on it. I came up with this one combo, and I'll admit I'm scrolling through my Twitter right now to find it. Here it is. Okay. So I think this is the most damage reduction you can get. You play this guy, Hot Helmet, the Blanket Weaver Lavani, and then here's the funniest one, Lake Acuity. So you could have like a rainbow energy or something that counts as a water, and that's a minus 120 damage
Okay.
reduction. So that just sounds like a good time to me. Like, who wouldn't have fun playing a deck like that? So I'm definitely gonna try it out. Not competitive, but it's fun to push the limits of things.
Well, I mean, you say not competitive, but like I'm looking at it kind of like I can see this winning games. Like, you know, obviously it's not Whale Lord levels of broken. Whale Lord's just, out of this world, especially the jumbo one that takes 30 less damage and then does 240 if it has a special energy attached. It's not at that level. But Grass does have, like Rillasaur is just like attach 2 energy from the deck, attach energy from hand, and it's going. So, there's things to think about. Like it could fit into existing shells. Tank and heal grass exists, like you mentioned. I don't know. Let's give Tangrowth a try. I'm excited to try it out. See how it does.
Think you'd also pair this with the Sceptile, because for one thing, you get some redundancy. You get the Gravile, which does the same thing as Groddle. For the audio listeners, I'm sorry, Groddle and Gravile sound exactly the same. One evolves into Torterra, the other one into Sceptile, and they both do the same thing. They find any stage grass throughout, but then not only do you get an extra energy attachment, but you also heal 30 from that. So yeah, there's a couple interesting things that you can do with it. This one is fun for brewing. You can just make your opponent frustrated between this and Brambleghast and probably Torterra as well. Just play some fun big guys that don't die. You don't even need a luxurious cape.
Yeah, and you mentioned Levani. Blanket Weaver does reduces damage by 40. Kricketune increases HP by 40. Grass has a lot of options, so Tangrath, look out. This is the card I think most grass people are excited about. Iron Leaves, and I think this is the card that's the best grass card out of everything we're going to see,
Yeah,
at least in Twilight Masquerade. So Iron Leaves, 1 energy. You can put 2 Pokemon from your discard pile to your hand. So utility in a basic, that's great. And then Avenging Edge, which is 1 grass, 2 colorless. So the same energy cost as the last 2 Pokemon we saw, but if one of your Pokemon were knocked out, it does 60 more damage. So in a basic that for 3 energy does 160. And the rate that we've seen on grass basics recently, or at least the ones that see play in Gym Leader Challenge, is not this. Shining Genesect does 50 plus 20 for each grass energy. So for 3 energy, it's doing like 110, which isn't a great rate. And then Zarude is doing 60 plus 20 for each grass energy. For the same amount of energy, you're doing 120. So here it is. Iron Leaves doing 160, which is a number that's pretty important in GLC. That's Galate numbers. And it pairs
yeah,
pretty well with Venusaur and Rillaboom, which grass is really good at getting up. Venusaur with a Jungle Totem ability doubles energy, and then Rillaboom voltage speed ability just searches up to and attaches. So Iron Leaves can be charged up and attacking in 1 turn after one of your other basics is down. I think it's the best card.
it definitely is. Save the best for last. It also only has one retreat, so it doesn't really get stuck. And the interesting thing is, even though the revenge attack is 3 energy, it's a grass and a double colorless. So in kind of alternative grass builds, maybe low-fi ones or low maintenance ones, if you play the double energy anyway, it's easier to power up with like a Raihan and attach return. So it has multiple uses that it's really interesting. I think the hardest thing I have with this is I'm struggling to think of my standard grass deck list. What would I cut for it? The Genesect is nice because of the ability of being able to move energy from other Pokemon to it. The Zarude is great because if you're going second, it's a support one. So that's where I have problems now. Is that as GLC keeps expanding and the older sets don't go away, it's hard to find where's the space for all this. But this is a card to consider on both the casual and the competitive level.
Yeah, and I'm not in my brain. I'm not cutting any Pokemon for this. I'm just adding it in. I just want another basic because the one thing that Grass really has a difficult time doing is if Venusaur or Rillaboom are active, like the basics are doo doo without the other
Yeah,
support Pokemon that's up there. So Iron Leaves is okay without them. It works really well with them, and then you don't have to worry so much about recovering the other basics if you're playing just a third one that's good. And then like Rillaboom, like how often do I see grass players as like their last 2 attackers trying to get in with Hammer In from Rillaboom for 140? I've even seen Desperation trying to get in with Solar Beam from Venusaur here for 90. Like at the end of grass games get pretty desperate if they can't get those basics back.
yeah, that's a good point. I've attacked with the Rillaboom more than I care to admit, and it doesn't always feel wrong. But you second guess yourself a lot. And it's like, do I really want to attack with him here? Having another attacker will be nice. You're exactly right about that.
And we said the last grass, but we still got a couple more here. I don't know where these cards are going to go, but I included them because they might be fun here. So we've got the Poltergeist with the store house hideaway ability, which basically is just bench barrier for itself. And then Sinichta here, and again, I'm probably butchering these names. Make fun of me in the comments below. But with the cursed drop ability here, which is pretty interesting. Put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. So it's kind of an interesting card that might go in grass spread. Not sure, but damage counters are always good. And then Spill the Tea ability here says discard up to 3 basic energy cards, and it does 70 for each damage card you discard in this way. So that attack, can do 210 damage. It costs 1 energy. Then you need to have 3 in hand. Not sure what that looks like or what build would want that.
Think it's its own build. This is probably an Eldegoss build. Maybe you play something that has like this and the Scovillain. Just kind of like a fun way to do something.
Hmm.
Spill the tea. I'll tell you, Pokemon is killing it on attack names. And Curse Drop, I didn't really consider you could play this in a spread deck. I kind of think of it too as if you're playing sort of a normal attacking deck, but you miss a KO by something, maybe another Torterra or Whale Lord or Snorlax. It's neat that you can. Well, no, not Snorlax because it's damage counters. But if there's a big thing that you need to clean up, it's nice that you can curse drop it away.
Yeah. We actually saw an interesting build on our deck of the week. I think last week, which was last week or the week before. I can't remember, but it came to us from Acco Blubber, who's really active in the Cardboard Warriors Discord, and his build was kind of like a discard basic energy into the discard pile, and then it was using a Lowland Executor, which
Oh, was it
did
the Executor one? Ah,
yeah
he has the coolest decks. I
yeah.
love that kind of stuff.
Well, and so it does like, X damage for each energy type in the graveyard. So maybe spill the tea here. I mean, it's only putting grass energy in there, but part of the deck is to discard energy. So maybe this is just another thing that kind of pairs well with that. Because that deck really only has 3 attackers and they all kind of max out at 120. So having something that could potentially do 210 might be nice.
Yeah, that sounds huge for it. I mean, if you combine that with a Hex, you're killing a Whale Lord. That's really interesting. I think a lot of grass, as we talk about it, is a brewer's dream. I think on the competitive side, Torterra might still just be the best one, but there's so many cool different like little deck ideas that are coming from the set from grass. I'll tell you, it's one the everyone's talking about the dragon, but actually grass is probably one of the types I'm the most excited about with this release.
Well, and you say brewer's dream, but I'm like, it's a brewer's nightmare, man. There's like 20 Pokemon I want to shove into these grass decks. And it's just like, those decks don't function when you have 20 Pokemon. That's always how I
No,
feel
no, they
about.
have to be different. I know it's the hardest thing is like you have to have them be different decks.
Right.
Don't
Well,
play more than like 16 Pokemon.
and that's what, when I was brewing my Meganium build up, I was up to like 24 Pokemon at one point. And I was like, oh God, like trying to like make cuts in those decks is so hard. So again, it
When
might
you
be a
start cutting to
nightmare.
stage 1, and then you're like, "Oh, if I prize Meganium, I just have nothing."
But
Yeah, those decks are so tough.
that's what my deck list ended up being is I cut a lot of the stage ones, but it's a fun deck to play. So.
It is. I have not figured that one out. I still want to.
Play my list. It's okay. All right. This card, I feel like we needed to include it. I don't think it's going to really see any play, so I'm going to just go ahead and say that out here. But it's the Teal Mask Ogerpon. Mountain Scroll ability, and I say ability, Mountain Stroll attack. Searches your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and puts them into your hand. Then Ogre comeback is 20 plus 20 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it's like the Gengar that puts damage counters for benched Pokemon, but it costs 1 more energy. It's just not good enough.
It needs to be a 1 energy attack to be interesting. It would be cool if Iron Leaves wasn't in the same set. It probably still wouldn't see play, but it's interesting that's a 2 attack, whereas the Genesect, the Zarude are all 3. Uh, uh, don't play this card. Maybe pick one up and try it in like a. I don't even know. I just run the Iron Leaves, I think.
Yep, agreed. Well, Fire time. Fire doesn't have much, but it's got an interesting card, and that's this Infernape here, which is again, a stage 2, which you're not going to see as your typical attackers, but this one might be interesting enough to try in a kind of a cool build. So, Fire Dancing lets you attach a basic fire and a basic fighting from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like. It's almost colossal with the Tar Generator ability, but instead it's from your hand, which is kind of a big cost if you think about it. Now, Scorching Fire here is 3 energy, 2 fire, 1 colorless, and it does 200 damage, which is a lot, and you only have to discard 1 energy. So, I mean, it's got a cool ability, it's got a cool attack, but it is a stage 2. And then Pokemon's kind of been building up to us. They gave us this Camerupt here with the Cinder Cannon attack. So 2 fire and a colorless is his attack cost. Cinder Cannon does 120, and then it does another 120 if you have a fighting energy attached to it. So again, synergy, is it good enough?
No, it's not. You have your Infernape, as you said, is stage 2, which is a big ask for like I am a known hater of fire decks. Like, I get it. But there's a reason, and it's because there's really no consistency. So first you have to get the Infernape, which is a big ask in and of itself. Then you have to get the camera up. And then you have to somehow also have a fire and a fighting energy in your hand consistently. No, not in a fight, not in a fire deck. You don't have any draw support in fire. You don't have any way to see most of your deck. You're usually living in top deck mode and it just doesn't work yet. Like you need some more support Pokemon that aren't stage 2s. The Pokemon Company loves to give fire really great Pokemon that are stage 2s, which it just doesn't work. Unfortunately. There are too many good decks that have stage 1 Pokemon or basic Pokemon that are powerful enough.
Yeah, it's frustrating because there's the Delphox that draws up to 6, but it's a stage 2. There's the Embor that's a Rain Dancer, but it's a stage 2. And then you think, okay, cool. There's a stage 1 that draws in the Salazzle with the Roast Reveal ability. You have to discard the energy from your hand, which then doesn't synergize with this needing fire energy in hand. So it's just like it's cool, but there's just like, can it work? And people will try it. Will I try it? 100%. But is it going to be consistent? And I think the answer, like you mentioned, Ray, no.
They forgot the most important stage 2 is Charizard, and you have people say no, but you have to play that one because I think you need a comeback mechanic for your deck to be competitive. So I think Fire needs Heat more in Charizard. And yeah, just to have the consistent draw, you need the stage 1 in Macargo with another stage 1 of Salazzle, which isn't too bad. Um, Maybe if you're playing like Energy Retrieval, Superior Energy Retrieval, and Clara, but for what? I think this card is mid.
I mean, you already have the Colossal, which people don't play because it doesn't work.
This guy does play
Well,
it.
I wrote the article. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, read my article about Ancient Garganacl. It's sweet. Don't listen to Ray. People play it. Trust me. Now,
You even
while
played Colossal and Standard. That's hilarious.
Well, while we have this up on screen, I do have to talk. There is a Team Magma Camerupt too, which you do get to actually play in the same deck because the Team Magma makes it have a different name. And it attaches a fire and a fighting from your discard pile to itself. So it can synergize a little bit here. I think his attack is just like 60 damage for 3, though, so it's not very great. But people are trying to play that with the Armor Rouge, which lets you move fire energy around. So you have the Team Magma's Camerupt on your bench, getting energy back from the discard pile, and then you're moving it around. So you could like play that with like multi-switch if you're really, really trying to get this deck to work without Charizard or something like that. But it's a lot of pieces, and it's a full bench, which has been Fire's main issue for a long time.
Okay, with the Team Magma though, as a quick tangent, because I know you're a Gen 1 or 2, or I think you're a 2er. How cool would it be to have Team Rocket Pokemon back again? I thought we were going to get that with the Pokemon Go set.
Yeah, give me some dark stuff. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
But we'll never get it. All
I'll say
right,
never. Maybe eventually. 25 years.
I don't know. I'm not the most optimistic person. Speaking on, Ray mentioned she's a fire hater. Wednesday I sat down at my locals and someone was like, "Man, you were so mean about fire on the podcast. You were like, fighting was okay, but you just hated on fire." And I was like, "Oops, my bad."
F is for fun.
F is for fun. So another Pokemon that sees some play in fire is Chandelure with the Spirit Burner attack, which is a pretty sweet attack. So it's 10 plus 60 more. What you do is you discard 5 cards from the top of your deck, and it does 60 more for each Pokemon you discarded this way. Then any of those fire Pokemon you discarded, you put onto your bench. So it's kind of an interesting attack. It only costs 1 fire. There are ways to stack your deck. Macargo is the obvious way to look at it. Mallow, Cypher, whatever it is. I can't remember that card from Temporal Forces, the Mallow
Say from
reprint.
Maniac's code breaking.
That one, yes.
The mouthful, yeah.
Yeah, but they exist, so you can like kind of stack your deck and then do 130, maybe get to 190 damage with just one energy on a stage 2 attacker, and then just plot down some busted Pokemon on your bench if you've done it correctly. So Litwick got printed in this new set, Twilight Masquerade, and it's just a basic with 1 retreat cost, and it has a call for family attack. So if you're playing the Chandelure, this Litwick looks pretty good.
I think I added this one for selfish reasons. If you don't know us, this is the type of fire that we build, which should say something about how we feel about fire. It's also the Yu-Gi-Oh players in us. It's like, whoa, we can special summon things. Let me play a Mallow and then a Max Revive to put a Cinderace and a Charizard onto my bench. This is, I think, the best Litwick that comes out. The Chandelure deck is actually really cool too, because if you really want to take a critical look at fire, there's 2 good attackers. There's Chi Yu and Entei, and then like Heatmore, which you have to have the Charizard set up. So it's like, okay, well, let me just focus on getting those 2 in Turbo and blah 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 blah. Still play the Macargo, but if I'm trying to get out these crazy things, they're all the stage 2s. I might as well just play Chandelure and have a ball while doing it. There are like 2 or 3 different Chandelures that people use. This is clearly the best one.
Oh,
But you do have to
obviously.
build your deck around it.
The Psychic one's the best one, but you know what? We'll give the prize to this
Oh
one.
yeah. That's all right. We talked about Psychic for an hour and a half at the last time.
That's why I made sure to have water this time, just because I knew this would go long.
Yep. We
Well,
told the people we'd give them 4 hours.
good. They want it. I'll make it into 6 different episodes, and we'll cut it and distribute it to the people. All right. Moving on. What's this Darmanitan? I can never pronounce this one either.
Darmanitan? Do you know how to say it?
Darmanitan, I think.
Darmanitan. Okay. Darmanitan. Stage 1, huge damage. All right. For 3 fire energy, it does 210, and then it does 70 to itself. So just had to include it because someone out there loves Darmanitan, and they're like, whoa, one that's playable.
Hate to admit it, I played if you were in the last podcast, I like took a huge break from Pokemon, came back. When I played Gen 5 last year, 2 years ago, I did play the Darmanitan and whatever, but it's because I like the Zen form. This card stinks, but if it was the Zen form, I might be able to advocate for it.
Zen form would be in a psychic deck, though.
Ah, dang it. Isn't it Psychic Fire?
Yeah, but
Yes, they could give it the fire.
they wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't.
Well, that's fire. Let's move on to water now.
Nothing for fire.
Yeah, not there's there's like hope for fire. It's like, yeah, look, we might print things that
That's
go with
worse than
this in the
having nothing.
future. Well, okay. Well, I'm a fighting
People
player.
message me all the time about this Infernape, and I finally have to say it on this podcast. It's not good. I'm sorry, people.
Yeah, I'm with you too. People keep bringing it up. It's the most exciting thing from the set for fire, but it's not. It's not going to work out the way we all hope it would.
No.
No.
Stage 1 even, maybe.
Stage 1 it would be good. Yeah.
But it's not.
Well, let's talk water. There's this Goldeen here. I don't know, Z-Man. You told me to put this on the slide, and I'm looking at it.
Dude, this is a sleeper pick. Okay,
All right.
being able to like discard an energy every turn, possibly 2. Okay, possibly 0. That's pretty cool. There's a Sea King that is kind of good, and sometimes in control you have to clear a big threat. There's a Swim Freely Sea King that does the same as the Shining Arcana Gardevoir. That I'm not too concerned about, but I think water control is going to get a lot more interesting. You have a Buizel that gets some cards back. There's some other cards in the set we're going to talk about. This is a card, pick it up, try brewing around. I don't have water control figured out quite yet too, but it's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, and It's got the festival lead ability, which we saw from Diplin. So if you have that stadium out festival grounds, it gets to attack twice, which is why Z-Man mentioned that it could discard an energy twice typically. And then its whirlpool attack for 2 energy is 10 damage, which is massive. And then it lets you discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon if you flipped heads. So I hope you're right about this. I don't really see it fitting into any existing thing. Like you said, brew around
Oh
with it.
no, nothing that's a good thing. And actually, the double colorless is awesome because you can play a double turbo. So that way you can turn the 10 into 0. So that way you're purposefully never doing damage because you actually don't want to knock out anything. You want to kind of like,
Stall.
yeah.
Frozlath here, I think will actually get see some play. I don't know if it will be good or not, but I know that there are people that are brewing with it right now to some success. And so
Oh,
this
that's awesome.
Frozlath is pretty sweet, 90 HP, which makes it level ball searchable. And then it has the Freezing Curtain ability. So during checkup, you put a damage counter on each Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, that has an ability except for any Frozlass. So this is pretty interesting because if you know anything about water, it's that their bench has a rain dancer with an ability, it has artillery with an ability, some of its basics have an ability, Wailord has an ability. So water plays a lot of ability Pokemon, and then you're maybe consider playing this Frozlass. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to give up on the fact that you're going to be damaging yourself, but I think it's really interesting. I've been messing around with water a lot because for our own locals, the badges I have left are the F is for funds and then water. And my locals refuse to stop playing colorless and psychic and stuff. So I have to try to figure out, all right, what's like the best water into this. And I personally think that the Starmie type of water is the best one. I don't exactly play Fishy Jump because right now I like to play Wishy Washy, the 180 HP guy in Silent Lab to kind of counter some of the common threats. But I think that Starmie being able to clear up a board, that this Frostlass will help a lot with that. But it needs testing for sure. I haven't personally messed with it. Water is also super tight on space. It's tough. You have to play like the 10 energy. You have to play 5 of the consistency cards, which are great cards, but you need the Octopus, you need the Inteleon. Then you need the guys that accelerate the water, like a Frostmoth or a Baxcalibur. So that's another 5. So that's 10 support Pokemon. That doesn't even include the attackers. So that is the thing I'll say is water is really tough to brew on and define space. So, like, what would you cut from this from a water storm? Or you can't cut your Kyogre, or I mean, maybe you can, but like then you have less attackers. Do you want to cut your artillery for it? So that I think
And
that's the
so even
hardest part.
like Frostlass is a basic. Like you need the snow run too.
Exactly, exactly. So you need 2 spaces for it. But I think this is a really cool card, and I think it will see play. I think it'll have success as well. You do not agree with me. We talked about this
And I
beforehand.
just think that water has too many things with abilities, just like Beige said. Like it's it's just not gonna work. You're doing too much damage to yourself. I don't think people necessarily think ahead when they're doing these sorts of abilities. I maybe that's mean.
Yeah, that's a bit facetious.
Well,
I wouldn't think ahead.
you say all this, and I'm going to 100% play this because I love spread decks. But
Oh yeah.
my Krabby spread deck that I've been playing, and I'm going to give a shout out. It's Mickey's idea, but Krabby doesn't have an ability. One energy does 10 to everything. You can Articuno blindside so easily. Articuno doesn't have an ability, and I've gotten to Articuno blindside 2 times in a game before. This Frozloth makes it so much easier. Palafin is another one I'm thinking of. Palafin's first attack does 30 and 30. And so it doesn't have an ability. It's not getting affected. So I do think that there are some decks out there that like would love to have this Frozlass. People are even trying like there's the Greninja that does for 2 energy does 50 to 2 things, which might
That's
be
right.
cool with this. It does have an ability, but it has the Jujitsu, which like is basically negate damage if you flip a heads. And then you can play
Yeah, you
quick,
can max these it out.
and then you can quick
Or
shooting
Archie even.
Inteleon. Yeah, quick shooting Inteleon also like puts damage counters on places too. So like there's some cool brews that might pop up. There's even another Greninja. If you discard a water energy, you can do 3 damage somewhere. So there's a lot of like snipe builds that might be interested in something like this Frozlass. I'm getting excited talking about it. I'm
Me too. I'm actually more excited about it now. I'm abandoning the Star Me idea. But like, yeah, if you don't have a Hydro Pump, kind of Yeah, this could really fit in there interestingly. I think there's a lot of potential here. And yeah, I mean, you can like Archie's out the Greninja. I think I've seen that from Joshua Baba, if I'm saying the name
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Made that popular. A Dempolion that snipes for 60, and then this could clean it up. There's definitely a lot of pieces there. It's just going to be what are the ones that you cut? Like, how do you get rid of the noise and how do you narrow it down?
Yep. 100%.
Kind of a similar problem that grass has, but this I think is better.
I do think that you're absolutely right that Frostdust does have a place in some decks. I should have clarified that it doesn't have a place in the normal water deck that people are
Oh
playing.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. Water is, I don't know. Water just has so much support that like anything that you want to do with water, you could probably make happen. And if you're playing against fairy, it's gonna do cool things, regardless of what your setup looks like. So water's just busted, and Telion's busted. Well, talking about that Greninja, because this is the Frigadier I play in that list, is the Gale Shuriken one that puts damage counters on things. So it pairs pretty well with that Frozloss that we mentioned. Well, there's a new one that's coming out, again, 90 HP, level ball searchable. And it has a pretty interesting attack. It's got one retreat, and for one water energy, it does numbing water, which is 20 and paralyzed. So paralyzed is super busted in the Pokemon trading card game. And so the fact that you have here a stage one that evolves into a pretty sweet stage two with a decent attack that can stall the game seems pretty good.
yeah. The only downside of it, besides the damage counters, is it's not shiny, and the art matters. Pokemon turns take a long time. I want to stare at pretty cards.
For sure. So I'm going to keep playing the shiny Frogadier, but this new one probably has a place, especially in some stall decks, especially when we get to our deck of the week, which I think is coming up here shortly. All right, Cramorant, the bad Cramorant here. Water snipe decks exist, and there are a lot of snipe Pokemon that already exist in water. Kyogre is the first one that comes to mind with Dynamic Wave. 4 energy, it does 180 damage to any Pokemon, active or benched. And then you put 3 energy
Probably
back
the best
to
one.
hand. And then Lapras, the Rapid Strike Lapras, does 100 damage for 3 energy to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon specifically, and then water comes back to hand. So Lapras and Kyogre, again, the main thing here, damage to the bench, energy back to hand. Well, the new Cramorant here does Spit Shot as an attack, which is discard all energy, and then it does 120 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's got to discard it. And water isn't the biggest fan of discarding energy. It wants it back in hand to use with its rain dancers. So when I look at this Cramorant, I'm like, okay, 120 damage is pretty good. That hits a lot of pretty important support Pokemon on the bench. And then I look at the discard aspect of it and I go, uh-oh.
I will say I'm a sucker for cormorants, the actual bird that this is based on. We have some that live near our lake. Our house is near a lake that we walk at every day. So I might be a little bit biased. One interesting thing with this is it's colorless. Does it say discard all water energy, or is it just any energy? Like, can you
Uh,
use double colorlesses on this?
it says discard all energy.
So I mean, that's interesting. It's a basic, so is Kyogre, but I guess yeah. So maybe that's the only thing is if you're trying to do the double colorlesses. The problem with it though is if you're doing a low maintenance water, you're probably playing the cool colorless stuff and all that shenanigans. So the card's interesting, but probably doesn't find an immediate home in anything.
Yeah, it just feels like there's better options. At least that's where my head is at. I played a lot of snipe, water snipe specifically, and it took a while for me to cut this Lapras, but this Kyogre is just too good.
Kyogre is so good. The only problem is like your opponent always has hex. There's like the last title, the last line of it is also after you put the energy back to your hand, your opponent will play Hex Maniac, so you can't back Caliber back down.
Well, it's not just Hex. It's like Hex, Marnie, in. Like they make you shuffle the water back in. Like
Yeah.
it's sad. But I will say, more than any other attack in my Fishy's Jump deck, I use Wave Summoning. As I'm getting set up, it just like in 2 turns, I have a Kyogre like ready to attack just by Wave Summoning, and then I'm hitting 180 anywhere. So it's interesting that Kyogre just kind of powers itself up. Again, those games go slower than you think, especially while you're trying to get your Inteleon Octillery online. All right. Fion. There's a lot of good Fiones in water, and it's criminally underplayed, I think. So the new Fion from Twilight Masquerade here has Beckon, which is just put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. So pretty interesting. We have another Fion in this format too that has the pull out attack, which is just put a card from your discard pile on top of your deck. So it's interesting. I don't know which one do you want more? Supporter into your hand, or on top of your deck? Hmm.
Oh, into the hand. I'll never pull out. I think you can edit that out. I think the Beckon.
We're
That's why
clipping
we have
it.
2 kids. If you're on Twitch, you get this live. I couldn't help it. We looked at each other beforehand. But this is water control, baby. I mean, getting a supporter from your discard pile right into your hand. This is what dreams are made of. I think this card is really cool. I don't have the answer to the deck list for it, but this card is awesome. What do you think?
I like them both. I think it's hard to say which one is better. Like supporter to your hand is really, really good, though you can be marnied out of it. Or any of the other put your hand into your deck. Um, I do think I might like the put any card on top of your deck a little bit more because what if you need that special energy? What if you need that basic Pokemon? I think it's a little bit more flexible, and then it's because it's not in your hand, it's not as susceptible to some of those disruptions. Um, but I think they're both good options.
Yeah. Plus, you get to say pull out.
I would never personally.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, there's another Fion too, Whirlpool Suction Peon, which is great because it's half an escape rope. It makes your opponent like switch out and then it puts itself on the bottom of your deck. So there's a lot of good Fions. I think there's even like another Fion that just like searches cards from your deck for some
Yeah.
cost or something. So Fion's got a lot of good printings. You just got to figure out which Fion fits into your deck. Do these fit in traditional water builds? Probably not. Do they fit in decks like control decks that want to reuse the same resource over and over again to set up kind of a board state that's unbeatable? Maybe. So again, that's your niche. Check these cards out. All right. This is, I think, the card that I'm going to try the most in water. I've got a deck built around this, or at least built around basics in water. And so that's Walking Wake here. Basic with 130 HP, so not bad. One energy retreat cost as well. And then it's got the Ripping Swell attack, which is water, water, colorless. And it does 20 damage times the amount of damage counters you place on it. And you can put up to 9. So that's 180. That's Snorlax numbers. So I think a basic that can hit big numbers, doesn't discard any energy, and then you can power it up with one of your rain dancers in a turn is pretty good.
What do
Yeah,
you think?
I agree. Nothing to add. Like, yes.
Yeah, a couple different interesting points too. It's an ancient Pokemon, so you can play Sadas, you can play the booster capsule to make it a 190, which gets you over Snorlax's 180. So
Hmm.
that's a different math than if you just play the Cape of Toughness, which was just the plus 50, then some 180. So a couple little cheeky things you can do. I think this is the most interesting card in Water. It's pretty simple because it's just big basics are really good in Pokemon, always has been, but this fits that niche.
It's just going to get return KO'd, and I kind of like that. It's nerfed to a certain degree. It's like they've understood maybe that Snorlax was a little too strong, and so like, hey, you put 9 damage counters on this. It only has 40 HP left. Like you're getting KO'd by a lot of things that are not good for 48 HP.
I forgot about that when I mentioned the ancient booster thing. Forget I said that. So that's I'd say the one thing to be worried about is it getting sniped, but then you just don't attack with it. So yeah, this card's fine. This is a good card.
Well, and then it's just a basic, right? Like it gets sniped, sad, get it back. Like, rescue stretcher it back onto your bench. Like that's the best thing about basics in Gym Leader Challenge is that they're so easy to get back and to reuse. That's why a lot of people think that Snorlax is so busted. Like 180
Yeah.
consistently over and over again on a basic that's pretty beefy is a problem. Well, they've eliminated the beefy aspect. So I don't think anyone's going to be complaining too much about this Walking Wake, but it is going to be good. One Fighting Fury belt attached to this, and all of a sudden it's taken down Torterra, your stage 2 that you've invested so much time and energy in getting. This can take care of it with a little bit of help, but it can do it.
So Terra not resist grass or resist water.
No, resistance barely exist anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. Resistance, bad
Except
mechanic in Gym
everything
Leader
resists
Challenge.
fighting. Yeah, fighting has it too easy, so things resist fighting, but otherwise,
Hey, but everything's also weak to fighting, so we'll take it.
it's true.
All right, lightning time. Lightning's got some cool cards. Nothing like amazing, but Twilight Masquerade's brought a couple cool things that we can kind of work with. So the first card I think is my sleeper pick for Twilight Masquerade is this Morpeko with the Snack Search ability. You get to look at the top card, and if you don't like it, you can discard it. Or if it's an energy, you can put it into your discard pile, and then you can use one of your Dynamotors, like Flaffy here on the screen, to just attach it to one of your basic Pokemon. So there is synergy there. Then its attack, Pick and Stick, allows you to attach two basic energy cards. So it's basically like Turbo Energize on a stick, but from your discard pile instead of your deck. And it's any basic energy. So Raikou here, with a crazy energy cost like Grass, Lightning, and Metal, can benefit from Morpeko setting it up. And then you can stay even on the prize trade, even if your opponent takes out Morpeko, because Raikou is going to take two prizes, most likely, doing 120 to the active and 120 to the bench.
I think this card is so cool. I put Battle Compressor in almost all my decks now. This works with it, and then also kind of is a 33% Battle Compressor. But yeah, being able to Battle Compressor away your Grass and Steel energy, and then attach it to the Raikou with the Pick and Stick. Um, if you just keep it on your bench and you're not attacking with it, having that extra consistency to burn through the bad cards of your deck, uh, is just awesome. I think that's actually pretty underrated in Pokemon, and it has the right HP. It's a 70, so if it is 80, wouldn't be as good, but you can find it with the Buddy Poffin. Lightning has tons of ways to find your turbo cards like Battle VIP Pass and Buddy Poffin, and because it plays the Zebstrika that just like sprints away the cards. It doesn't really matter if you play a Battle VIP pass, but you can play like cards that are traditionally bad, like a Volkner, to be able to find your those cards if you're going second. So I think you can set up your bench really easily with Lightning. Of course, it's susceptible to Parallel, but at the same time, if you have to get rid of this with Parallel, who cares? You can find it later. Like we said before, basics are easy to recur. The downside is that you like to play Green's Exploration in a lot of electric decks. So it does not synergize with Greens. That is one downside. Finally, Morpeko is a really cute guy. And that art, he looks fantastic.
He's got a little teepee in
I
the
don't think I could.
background.
Yeah, he is very cute. I don't think I could personally play it because I hate discarding cards, but more power to you if you're not that type of person.
Yeah, and it
I like
takes a
to think of
certain
your graveyard as a resource.
I know, but it's
it it
different in Pokemon.
it definitely is, and it takes a certain person to play Lightning because, like, you're just discarding like your best cards. Like, oh, I need to find that one energy. Could buy all these great cards. Hello, new four. Like, so that's why I think this card will see some play. I don't know if it will be a mainstay in the decks, but I think people will try it at first, and they'll be like, "There's just a lot of other things that we can do." Like, I mean, just play Turbo Energize instead. Like, it's just as good. So, is it
I will say it's
superfluous?
easier
We'll
to
see.
find than Turbo Energize. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is easier to find because it's a Pokemon. So, like, that's the interesting thing. But then it's harder to get cards into your discard pile. But sometimes if you're playing just Turbo Raikou, it's hard to get that second power up, so it can help with that. But then again, the greens is a huge thing. Like a lot of people don't even play the Mareep that puts you to sleep because you want green. So it's interesting. There's just a lot of different like points and counterpoints with this card. I think this is actually one of the most interesting cards in the set, which is funny because it's so simple.
Yeah. And we'll leave the Bruin to probably Bohemian, who I know is from your locals, who's a Turbo Ryko player, and then Weeder, who at the Cardboard Warriors is known for that. We'll leave it to them. Check out their list. I'm sure they're going to have a list coming out that tries this card out soon. So check them out if you're looking for Turbo Raikou builds. Uh, Next up, Zapdos, one of the OG 151. Much love for them. This Zapdos is pretty sweet. So one energy, Thunder Wave. It does exactly what it does in the game. Flip a coin, heads, paralyze, which again, paralyze is a great effect. So it can be a stall mechanic for one energy. That is awesome. But the second attack is pretty sweet as well. It's lightning, colorless, and it does 190 damage, and then you discard all energy. So it's 10 more damage than Snorlax on a basic, only 120 HP, and then it plays with what lightning likes to do, which is discard energy after the fact. If you're thinking Regieleki does 120 and then 40 and 40, so Regieleki puts 200 to the board, but Regieleki has a tough time getting rid of active Pokemon. This Zapdos is very rarely missing any KOs. The only downside, really, I see in playing this Zapdos is you don't get access to the Donk King of GLC, which is the Zapdos with the Thunderous Assault ability. So for one energy, it does 10. And then if it switched from the bench to the active, similar to what Hoopa does in Dark, it does 70 more damage. And it isn't affected by weakness either.
Yeah, it's so tough that this is printed on a Zapdos because it'd be a no-brainer that you'd play it otherwise. The Donk one, I've sometimes gone back and forth. There's a lot of times that Goober just gets stuck in the active. So, he won't take the Donk. He'll get a significant kill, and that's great. But then he just gets stuck there with his 2 retreat. This one hitting for the 190. And what is the retreat on this one? Is
I
this
think
one
it's
a 2 as
2 on
well?
this one. Yeah.
Okay. So you can have a similar issue, but it's the power level of it because lightning is fragile, but it doesn't have a huge attack power either. Like Luxray is one of your best ones with 180. That one's kind of an include in everything. So yeah, if this was on like anything else from a Zap other than a Zapdos, I still think it's going to see a good amount of play. I know this is one of the cards you are the most excited about.
Yeah, this is one of the cards in this set that I see the most potential in. It does really stink that you lose that other Zapdos, but I think it would be at least something for people to try. Like I am generally against trying new things, because I'm just a negative person. I think the Zapdos is worth trying,
Yeah.
which says a lot.
Well, I hate donking. I'm going to be honest. I want my opponent and I to play the game. So sometimes I intentionally exclude this Zapdos just because of that. Like, I want to give little Timmy a
That's
chance since we
crazy.
keep bringing up
That is
Timmy.
nuts.
So I'm going to play this other Zapdos for that exact reason, and I'm just going to paralyze my opponent for the first 2 turns while I charge it up, and then hit them for 190. That seems much better than just donking them with Zapdos on the first turn. All right, Ray, it's your time to shine. It's Dragon time. So we've
Yeah.
got up on stream, we've got Dreepy and Dracloak, who have been printed into Dragon for the first time. Now, there is a Dragapult, but it is a rules box Pokemon, so we haven't actually gotten a non-rules box Dragapult that is printed into Dragon yet. But the Dracloak has the Renaissance Raid ability, which is basically similar to Pidgeotto's Airmail, which is look at the top 2 cards, one into your hand, one into the bottom. So it's a 90 HP, level ball searchable, 1 energy retreat cost, and a 70 HP basic in the form of Dreepy, which is great for Buddy Poffin. So all things seem great, Ray, right?
No. I'm sorry. I know that there's a lot of people that are excited about this one, and then the next one, Tatsugiri, they're like, yeah, we're gonna put these in our deck. It's gonna be great. No, it's not gonna work. We've actually tested it. It's really bad. It's just not enough. You don't have enough space in Dragon, so people try to cut the Dragonite line. They're like, this Dracloak and combined with the Tatsugiri is better than No, it's not. Because the Dragonite gets you the supporter that you need for the turn that you need it. Dracloak gives you a chance of 2, which isn't great. It really isn't. And it's it doesn't evolve into an attacker, so you are a lot of people are also gonna cut the Regidrago. So you're losing an attacker, which you can't lose an attacker in Dragon. You already don't have enough. It's just it's not good enough support for the cards you're cutting to get it. Unfortunately. Like maybe this will be better if they eventually release a Dragapult that you can use that's also an attacker. But for right now, it's just not enough to get you there. It's not worth the include.
I think the Dragapult being an attack would make a big difference. It's funny because I think we did about 10 games with this, and it just felt kind of mid and not worth the space because we only have one flex spot in our Dragon list, which we've been refining for like 2 years because Dragon hasn't changed that much. Having the same list for 2 years isn't that impressive when it's Dragon.
And that's the problem too, is that Dragon is slowly seeing a decline
Yeah.
because all of these other decks are getting these great cards. And there's this power creep that's occurring in GLC, and Dragon is not keeping up. And these cards don't help with the power creep. They're just extra support that isn't quite good enough.
Yeah, and that's something that the Pokemon Company likes to do is, wait for a while and then release a big dragon set. And then that's I think what we're going to get in a couple months. There's the set that's coming out in August. It got named today. It's like Fabled Shrouds or something like that. I can't remember the exact name. That's not the dragon set, but we're getting a dragon set soon that has specifically dragon themed cards in it. So there's a chance that dragon gets a whole bunch of cards in that set, and all of a sudden the power creep hasn't mattered as much. But when you talk about this Dracloak, I guess I see, and I haven't tested it at all yet. So my opinion is coming from absolutely nothing. I just see maybe an alternative to not just the Dragonite, but maybe some of the other consistency engines that already exist within Dragon. It's just like another way. Like if Dragonite is prized, Dracloak can get you something. And that's what I see this card as, which is why I'm willing to give it a try. And I hope that my testing goes a little bit differently from what you two have done. But obviously, it could be the same way too. But I'm willing to give the Dracloak a try. I haven't heard lots of great things about it. And obviously from you two, I'm hearing less than stellar reviews about it, but it's something. Dragon got something. We can be happy about that at least.
I thought we were doing something wrong, so I texted Lee Hoffman one day when I was picking up one of our kids from daycare, and just said, "So like Dracloak is really mid. What am I doing wrong?" And then that was the validation I needed to hear when he also called it mid. And that's the card's not a bad card. It's just kind of
It's not good enough.
it's just kind of eh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we had Lee on stream last week talking Dragon with us. We didn't reach into the Dracloak yet because we wanted to save that for the spoiler episode. But I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe other people, if you're testing Dracloak out there and you're watching this on YouTube, where you can comment, maybe tell me your experience about Dracloak. How's it been going for you guys? But you kind of touched on it a little bit, Ray. Tatsugiri. And I think Tatsugiri is going to be good. And again, I know you mentioned your testing with it, but Tatsugiri, again, it meets a lot of the requirements we've talked about so far. 70 HP basic, one retreat cost. It has a good ability and attract customers, which once during your turn, if it's in the active, look at the top 6 cards and you can reveal a supporter and put it into your hand. You shuffle the rest back into your deck. And this is very like a callback to Jirachi with the Stellar Wish ability, which does the similar thing. It's any trainer, but for 5 cards. And then that gets paired with a skateboard because it puts itself to sleep. And then you can use a skateboard, which allows it to retreat if it's asleep. So I like Tatsugiri, especially it lets you run maybe like U-turn board, which is a pretty cool card. Maybe with it in your deck, which is maybe 2 spots instead of 1 spot because that energy is so important in dragon builds. But I thought that this Tatsugiri would be pretty busted. I know people are talking about cutting Dragonite for that, and I don't think that's the answer. But I think as something early to get you kind of going while you have your setup getting set up, Tatsugiri would be pretty good.
This is interesting too because I found that in the standard dragon, this card isn't good, and I know you kind of mentioned that.
Right.
But I think in the future set, spoiler alert. So if you don't want to know about future cards, skip for 30 seconds. There's a Curum that comes out that if your opponent has a Colress in the discard, it can be one of the 3 Colresses that exist. It hits for 110 to 3. But then it has this like absurd energy cost that looks crazy. But actually, there's a Hurricane Dragonite that lets you accelerate a water and a lightning energy from your hand to your Pokemon. So I was kind of messing with a future dragon deck that has the Tatsugiri, the Miraidon, which can accelerate to itself and then does 160 after it does. Um, and then okay, there's some crazy things in there. But the nice thing is, and I guess the long story short, is if you ever want to use a different Dragonite, that you can have this Tatsugiri, so you still have some consistency. Another combo I thought about was having the U-turn board in Dragon actually feels really nice, and you can use it with Hakamo. Am I saying him right?
Uh,
Hakamo,
yeah, sure.
the one
Komodo.
from Alola.
Yeah.
It does 180 if you can discard a tool. So that works with the U-turn board. You can bounce that back up to your hand. It's cute. I still don't think it's better than traditional dragon. And you're probably just listening to me going to like none of this matters. It's just not my dragon.
I think I think that other dragons are worth exploring, especially now because I mentioned that it's just not keeping up anymore. Um, the Tatsugiri might have a place in some decks. I think the Dracloak doesn't at all. Um, and I guess I feel the same way about the Pidgeotto Airmail. I never saw that card as being useful. Maybe it's just my luck is bad, but I think the Tatsugiri could have a place in potential dragon decks. I don't think it has a place in the current standard dragon deck. I know, or I've heard that people try to replace the Regidrago with it. I don't think that's the move at all. just because you need that other attacker, and Tatsugiri is not that. But it does have a good ability. It's unfortunate that it has to be in the active to use it, because sure you can retreat it with a U-turn board, but what if you need to get into it and then you're putting a float stone on something that maybe needs a macho band or a sparkling cape, and that's kind of hard. Um, so Tatsugiri might have a place. It's not in standard dragon in my opinion, but I think that dragon might need some exploration. I think I'm gonna have to do some exploring in dragon just because.
I think the important thing is if in standard dragon, don't cut the Dragonite. Like if you play
Yeah,
this, try to make room for that. And but it is tough because it competes for space with the Reggie Drago, and you need that attack. I think this card's interesting though,
yeah. Maybe you don't have the flapple. I don't know. We've been messing with the flapple. Dragon just doesn't have a lot of room, and so it's hard.
which is so funny because the deck has barely any attackers.
You
But
know, but because it doesn't have all of the support as like water or psychic, um, you need to have a lot of good consistency cards in Dragon for it to work, and because you are often living in top deck mode if you don't have your Dragonite set up.
Yeah.
our motto for Dragon is just trust. It's almost like the heart of the cards for
Dragon
you. Dragon
provides.
provides. That's funny. My first badge of the year, our first tournament was on 1-1. And the previous week with Dragon, I went 0-3. I'm just like, I was not finding what I'm needing. I hate not having consistency cards. She's like, you just gotta play it as Dragon provides. We practiced a little bit and then I went 3-0. And every time it's before I top decked in my head, not always out loud, just go, Dragon provides. And it works. So that's the secret to Dragon. You don't need Tatsugiri, you just need the heart of the cards. Dragon provides.
Just gotta hope. You just gotta hope the dragon will give you what you need.
Just
And
will it into existence.
And I feel like, I think we talked about this with Lee last week too. Like Dragon does have some pretty good support Pokemon, like Gabite with the Dragon Call ability, searches up Pokemon. Fast Call is an amazing ability. What Dragon really needs is a non-conditional DDE compatible attacker. Because like the Revenge attack on Druddigon, conditional. The Drampa attack, conditional. Just give me like a 150 that costs 2 with a crazy energy cost, but it's DDE compatible. And then like dragons in like Snorlax territory when it has like a big base that does things. And that would really help Dragon out a ton. Maybe too much, but I don't know. For now,
I
we're
think that would
getting
be fair,
Tatsugiri.
honestly.
Yeah. Tatsugiri and Jerkloak are our new tools. People are going to be trying them out in Dragon. Dragon finally got something. And I think, again, Dragon provides. Uh,
All
the
I need for
third,
it is a new dragon set. So I'll say that.
we're waiting. We're hoping for
This is
something
the one
good.
you're the most optimistic about, though.
Yes.
Yep. So up on screen here, we got the new Applin. So there's been a dragon flapple for a while, and it's got the acidic mucus attack, which is similar to Weavile in Dark. What it does is for one colorless energy, it does 50 times the amount of ability Pokemon that your opponent has in play. So a pretty good Pokemon, but you could never play it because there was not a Dragon Applin. Well, Dragon Applin came out. They printed it in the new set. And of course, it's pretty decent, only 40 HP, but it does have a call for family attack. So, also useful if you're just running it not by itself, but if you end up starting it, it's at least got something to help you get set up.
It's funny too because Jeff, I know you don't love standard, but this card was played in standard before, but never with Applin. It was with the Phantom Transformation Zoroark because they existed at the same time. So it's funny because I just Applin has just never been our vocabulary, but both the Flapple and the Appleton, the one that does 70 for each special energy, that one was huge in the Lugia format. So if for those of you coming from standard, that's the Flapple that we're talking about is the one that does that was in Zoroark before. I think this card's really cool because some of your tougher matchups play Pokemon with a bunch of abilities: colorless, water. I'm not sure if grass is a tough matchup, but that one plays a bunch of abilities. Psychic. So I mean, really, the best decks in the format play a ton of abilities. The reason they're the best decks is because they do what you need them to do during the turns, and the reason you can do that is from abilities on board. So this is a nice way to take advantage of that. But I'm talking too much. You are the dragon expert.
Yeah, I was a hater for Fluffle, and I'm not convinced yet. I think largely because it just gets return killed immediately. I wish it had a little bit more bulk for what it's doing. I understand that one energy cost is pretty nice. So it not having bulk kind of makes sense. But it being a stage one and it immediately getting a turn kill, pretty much no matter what, is painful. But it can potentially deal a lot of damage and knock out a good Pokemon. And if you have your Lost City set up, it can take out a Pokemon that's very important potentially. So, and for good. So I we're still testing it. I'm still testing it. I'm not convinced yet, but I think that this is the card that has the most potential with Dragon in the new set. I guess Flapple's not new, but the Applin lets you play Flapple. So, and the Copper family, as you said, is really nice, just in case you start it. I mean, it's kind of bad if you start it because it's gonna die, but at least it helped you out for a little bit.
And as someone who likes to play a lot of Hitmon Bros, I love to see a Pokemon rely on abilities with only 80 HP sitting on your bench. So everyone, please play Flapple. Keep doing it. Uh, well, that's Dragon. Psychic. Psychic, not getting a lot, finally. Finally. Psychic isn't getting a lot. It's got some interesting cards again. I feel like, when we got to Dragon there, we were like, wow, hey, new Dragon stuff. People are going to try these in the deck. But all kind of the other cards we've talked about, maybe like one or two basics with standing, we've been like, these are kind of brewing. The Psychic cards feel that in that same vein. Like these are cards you're probably going to be brewing with. And so we're going to start with this Farah Giraffe. And I don't know if I'm ever saying that right or not, but
I
it's a
think it's
pretty.
Farigiraf?
No,
Farigiraf. That's it. Right?
now, people are going to love
All right.
roasting me in the chat, and that's okay. Keep doing it. Especially since I'm a language teacher, just throw it at me. I deserve it. The games need voice actors. If I'm going to say this, Pokemon games need voice actors. I don't watch the show, so if until the Pokemon games get speech actors doing something within the game, I'm okay to mispronounce the names, and I'm going to mispronounce them on purpose sometimes. So we're going to do
You
this.
should watch the show though. We alternate between Vikings and then the Pokemon. It was Journeys. Was it now Horizons?
Horizons.
It's fantastic.
It
I will
Oh,
is.
say, yeah.
I only watch the OG's show, and I'm hoping that once my son is old enough to where he cares about plot, we'll watch the OG show together and watch like the Bye Bye Butterfree episode and cry together. Like those are hopes.
Yeah.
I haven't watched anything past like the Orange Island Adventures or whatever like that. So but one
Orange
day.
Island's a classic. You know that was them stalling because they didn't have the episodes yet for Gen 2, or maybe it was Gen 2 didn't come out yet. So that whole arc was just filler,
Yeah.
but it's really fun filler. Pokemon's it's a fantastical journey. I can't give enough love to it. The only thing I hate from that time is they never finished the GS ball because that's when the whole Pokemon thing was going to end, and then they realized we are printing money with this Pokemon thing. It can't end, but they never resolved the GS ball. I needed to see Celebi come out of there. Little boy Zach is still not resolved because I never saw Celebi come out of the GS ball from that era.
All right, we got to get a therapist for Zach so he can resolve some of his issues.
In the meantime, I have Farigiraf here.
Farigiraf. We'll call it Farigiraf. Thank you for saying that. So Farigiraf is pretty funny. Again, funny, cute, maybe is the word for it. Stage 1, double colors attack for mid-rumble. It is 40 times the amount of stage 1s you have in play, which, Psychic has some pretty fun stage 1s. Malamar, Zatu come to mind. Kirlia is pretty good. So there are lists that already run a couple of stage 1s. Could a stage 1 Psychic only build exist? I don't know. And that's what you guys are all for. Brew it up. Send me the list. All right, Farigiraf. Now, the great thing about a playable Farigiraf maybe is this Girafarig is actually one of the only Pokemon in the game, and one of the only ways in the game to get rid of cards from your opponent's discard pile. So the Get Lost attack here on the Girafarig is one colorless energy, and it says put 2 cards from your opponent's discard pile into the Lost Zone. So it can be a lost city that gives up a prize potentially, but like this is again one of the only ways. I don't know if there's any other, but this is the only way to get rid of cards permanently so that your opponent can't recur them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I mean, if I really wanted to brew, okay, the obvious cute thing with Farigiraf is you can play. What's the stadium that gives your bench like unlimited potential? You can play that in a bunch of stage 1s. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Skyfield or something like that.
Skyfield, yeah. That's cute, but that's bad. Something that is also bad but could be interesting is with the 50 more HP. maybe you throw a luxurious cape, so he's 240, and then a memory energy, so you can use get lost twice. Or maybe it's you have a psychic control that plays get lost, but if you need to clear a threat, you can evolve to the Farigiraf. Maybe some of your other stuff is stage two. It's an interesting card. It's really because the Giraffarig is so interesting that the Farigiraf is kind of interesting beyond just the cute. But I think some creative minds could brew into this.
Yeah, it's the Giraffe Rig. The Giraffe Rig is what you want to play, but
Yeah.
it's a 90 HP basic that doesn't do a whole bunch. So yeah, hopefully there's another Giraffe in the future that does the thing.
I hope so, because actually the Farig EX in standard is a control based one, so it'd be neat to get a control based one in GLC too.
That's pretty sweet. Well, the next card on our psychic journey is Monkey Dory, which I'm relatively excited about. I don't know what the build looks like, but I've got ideas. And so, Monkey Dory here, its ability states that if it has any dark energy attached, you can move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Its attack is nothing special. It's Mind Bend, which is an attack that a lot of psychic Pokemon have. It's 1 psychic, 1 colorless. It does 60, and it confuses. 110 on a basic. Not bad stats, but obviously, you could hope for better. Now, I've got it up here on the screen with a couple of cards that already see play in other psychic decks that synergize pretty well. So the first one that came to mind for me was Gengar with a Netherworld Gate ability. Basically, if it's in your discard pile, you can just plop it straight onto your bench, but you have to put 3 damage counters on it. Well, what does Monkey Dory let you do? Move 3 damage counters. So this is 2-card combo. Pretty cute. And then Giratina here, also similar to the fact that it lets you play it from your discard pile onto your bench. It puts damage counters onto your opponent's Pokemon, but then its Shadow Impact attack puts 4 damage counters on your Pokemon. So that then you can move with the Monkey Dory. And of course, the Screamtail sees play already in a couple of psychic combo lists where you use the Giratina to put damage on the Screamtail, and then it does 20 damage for each damage counter on itself to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So if you damage the Screamtail, you can do big damage. And if the Screamtail happens to survive, maybe you could move those damage counters to maybe take a cheeky KO in between your attacks. So I don't know. There's stuff.
This is actually the second card I'm the most excited about. And you were talking about this a little bit too.
Yeah, I don't really play that much Psychic, at least not the standard one, but I think it has potential. I'm not fully convinced. I think you're more convinced than I am. Um,
Well, I'll tell you the build that I'm playing, I haven't subjected you to because you hate playing against Lawson and Psychic. And I need to give a shout out here to DJ Backwards, who's one of my team members and local friends. But we've actually been playing this with Lawson and Psychic as a way because you already played the Gengar. And this lets you play 1 Dark Energy and a Mirage Gate, which is interesting because it can power up like a Blacephalon in 1 turn, for example. And
Hmm.
it's been neat because then it makes it where you can do 15 on one of the turns instead of just the 12. Um, so that's something I've still been testing. I've only done 3 games, and again, they were solitaire games, which is not as much fun as playing against someone else. But did not want to subject you to a lawsuit. I do the same thing for things like Fairy Control. I don't subject people to that. I just kind of solitaire that. And I'll tell it's interesting. It's been pretty interesting there. I actually like having the Dark Energy and the Mirage Gate, and the ability to take off the other 3. I really like Gengar in that deck. I've seen some people go to Meloetta, which I can understand the logic, but having 1 less basic so you have higher odds of starting Comfy is nice.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think this is really cool in the Giratina deck too, just because it is that little extra push. And when you play spread decks, sometimes you are missing a KO that can win you a game by 10 or 20. 30 doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a big difference that I think can get you there.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll brew around with it. We'll play with it a little bit. Do I think a Monkey Dory list ends up being like oppressive in the format or even relatively good or competitive? I don't think so, but like the possibilities are there. Like the fact that just Gengar alone kind of utilizes it well is pretty fun and something I want to be trying out and then maybe being sad about later.
Yeah, I think Gengar is the natural partner. I mean, Compressor for like Dark Energy and Gengar away, and then you play like the Energy Retrieval or the Training Court and stuff like that. Like I said, I think Lawsuit and Psychic really cool natural partner for it.
Yeah. Well, here is the second in that line. Pheasantipity is what we're going to call it, and it's got the Adrenaline Pheromones ability, which again you have to have a dark energy attached. But then if you flip a heads while it has a dark energy on it, you can prevent damage. So it's very similar to Dragapult with the Infiltrator ability, and then Espathra, which has the Stance ability to basically gets immunity for a turn once you've evolved it. So if you're a big fan of like not dying psychic cards, this Pheasantipity kind of fits right into it. Its attack isn't great. It's one energy and it does 30 times the amount of energy attached to it. So in order to get up to like, 120, you have to have 4 energy, 155. Like it's just not a particularly good rate. You do typically have cards like Malamar or Zatu in Psychic to help attach that energy, but putting it on a 120 HP basic, maybe not worth it at times.
This is something we tried on stream last week. So if you missed our first podcast, our psychic deck that's our favorite way to play psychic is Zatu Malamar. And with the Spathra. So we cut the Spathra and the Flittle, literally for Pheasantipity and a Dark Energy just to try it. Jeff, you're right on the money. It wasn't enough damage, but I think this card is interesting. I'd like to see some other minds on it. I will say too, in our testing and on stream, we were really unlucky. It died a lot of the time, and that's where I was missing this Spathra and the guaranteed hit of it. The other downside too is you can't play Tulip because you need to get the dark energy, so you play Clara. And sometimes that mattered. There was a lot of times I wanted the Tulip to be able to grab the Galarian Articuno and the 3 energy. I wanted the flexibility of what my counts were for energy versus Pokemon. But this card's pretty cool, honestly. The damage output is the toughest thing. But if it was a little bit, it wouldn't be too good, I guess, if it was more damage. But it'd be talked about more, I think. But it's a cool card.
Yeah, it's
The
cool.
art's pretty. I yeah.
All right. Here's a card that Psychic already has other cards that do the same thing. We've got Clefable here. And it has the metronome attack. And so for 2 colorless energy, you get to choose any one of your opponent's attack and you just get to use it. So it's pretty interesting. It's on 120 stage 1 Pokemon. Is it better than some of the other options that Psychic has available? Mimikyu is one that comes to mind. It's an energy and a colorless, and it just copies the attack of your opponent's active Pokemon and what it did last turn. And then there's the Neoligo, which is 1 energy, and if your opponent has exactly 2 prizes, you can choose any of your Pokemon's attacks. So Copycat and Nightcap are both conditional, but they're on basics, which make them easier to recur. They're pretty easy to power up in the same vein that Clefable is. The fact that like 1 Raihan or Dimension Valley or just 1 Psychic Energy on the Nihilego make them useful in 1 turn helps them out a ton. Is this Clefable as good as them?
No.
No.
Mimikyu is amazing. It's less conditional, so that's kind of neat because your opponent didn't have to use the attack. So that's kind of cool. Now, I gotta give a shout out to Bohemian here, Turbo Raikou guy. He swears this is the most broken card in the set. I didn't mean to laugh. I don't think that's exactly true of Bohemian, but it is interesting. I'm quickly looking up the Clefairies on Cardboard Warriors as well. There's 7 of them. Looks like the best one is actually called Mini Metronome, funny enough, which has the same effect for a double colorless, but it's a coin flip, so you have to flip heads to get it. So I think that's the other problem too, is that there's not a great Clefairy, so that's 2 deck spaces. Your opponent, I don't think it's worth it, but it is one of those cards that's cool. And what I love about this format is when you have someone like Bohemian that says this is the best card, they will find a way to build a deck around it and make it work and take over for a night. Like that's the coolest thing is I might not see the vision, Jeff. I don't know if you see the vision, but it is an interesting card, and so it doesn't have the conditions. Mimikyu is a no brainer. You play that in your psychic list. This one you have to kind of more build around, so inherently less good in a traditional sense because of that.
I think also that it only has 120 HP. It's not quite enough anymore. A lot of things are still gonna 1-hit KO it, just as they're gonna 1-hit KO Mimikyu. So you're not really gaining
Hmm.
anything by the boosted HP, but you are losing something by having to evolve it.
Yeah.
A great point. It's only 10 more HP than the Nalego.
And this is the thing about people that play Raikou in their builds is they're always worried about copycat attacks. So not to throw any shade at Bohemian, but like Raikou players and Guzzlord players are always like, but what if they use my attack to get 2 prizes? Well, bro, that's your entire game plan, man. Like Like, come
Yeah.
on. So, um, so I think maybe that plays a little bit into it. Like, I'm just sitting here, like, being like, imagine if I like used Hitmonlee's special combo and they tried to copy it. Like, they can't like legally copy it. So it's interesting. I think it's good. I think people will try to build around it. You're relying on your opponent playing good cards, but as we know in Gym Leader Challenge, sometimes your opponents are going to play their favorite cards. So if you're sitting here with a Clefable and the best thing that you can copy does like 70 damage, it's not that great. Maybe against a control strategy, what are you doing with your Clefable? Not much. So I don't know. I still think Mimikyu and Nihilego are the way to go. Um, Clefable will be fun to try out. And I hope that Bohemian's right. I hope it's busted. And I hope that we're all scared of it in 2 weeks. But just don't play Amazing Rare Raikou, and you'll be fine.
Play Lost Zone, Sableye, so that way your opponent doesn't have 10 in the Lost Zone, they can't do anything.
Well, speaking about your locals, we'll talk, and you mentioned him earlier. We're going to talk DJ Backwards deck, deck of the week. I ended up giving it a name. I couldn't find his name. He put his deck of the week in my Discord, which for those of you who don't know, All About That Beige has a Discord now. So just find me. I think I posted on Twitter where the link was. Join the Discord, and you could submit to me decks that you think are worthy of the deck of the week spot. So DJ Backwards submitted this list, and I thought it was worthy of the spot. So I'll real quickly talk about the list, and then Ray and Z-Man will hear your thoughts as we go from there. But it's a pretty sweet list. It's called Wild Freeze Water. That's the name I gave it. And it's basically based around an Articuno with the Wild Freeze attack that does 70 damage and it paralyzes. No coin flips needed. It just paralyzes. Now, it does do damage to itself, 50 damage. So it's not going to be able to do it infinitely, but he's playing like Emergency Jelly to help kind of mitigate that. He's also got Rough Seas to help heal it. So the entire point is to just keep using Articuno over and over and over again to take KOs from your opponent, paralyzing, which again is one of the most busted things you can do in the game. And then you've got some other controlling elements. Obviously, you have Inteleon and Octillery to keep your engine going. You have Fione to force your opponent to switch out. You've got Counter Catcher, and then you're playing the Melodic, which lets you grab cards from your discard pile. And then you're using Devolution Spray to do that again so that you can get more cards back from your discard pile so that you can just keep Articunoing. And then at the end of the day, after your opponent's been paralyzed and tried to switch out, and there's all these damage counters on the board, he's just like, let me use Rapid Strike Starmie to finish the game. And Rapid Strike Starmie says, for each water energy that you discard from it, you can do 30 damage. So it's not impossible to think that this Starmie might have 6 or 7 energy after you've used Nessa to power it up, and then just board wipes your opponent from there. Pretty sweet deck.
Yeah, got to give a shout out to him and our team, Kakuna Rattata. I think he's one of the few people that I talk about GLC with on a nightly basis, and so it's usually building bad decks. He did admit to me, we talked this afternoon when you messaged me that he got the deck of the week. And he said he hasn't played it yet, but one of our other locals is actually going to try it this Tuesday. And yeah, essentially the goal is to paralyze your opponent every turn. You gust a new monster before you take the KO, so you make sure you never go ahead on prizes. Just keep spreading the damage and lock them with the paralysis, and then exactly like you said, you board wipe the Starmie. I think that the really cool thing is being able to reuse the Milotic with the Devo and the Emergency Jelly. We saw a similar thing in Standard where actually another local player, Charles Lockyer in Maryland, made top 8 of a regional with a deck like this that used the Articuno and the Emergency Jelly and reused it. Anything is possible with Octillery and Inteleon. I, I will say I think there's better versions of the Starmie, but this is a cool version that I have personally never seen before.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it out. I've been sitting on this Articuno. Like I bought like 5 when they came out, and I'm just like, oh, just like you can paralyze without a coin flip. That seems so busted. And then I just never put it in any deck because I just was like, I don't actually think it's that good. And so here we are. I think this is a list I'm going to be kind of playing around with as we go forward. Hopefully, my locals still like me. All right. Moving on. Deck of the week. All right. Big stuff. Fighting time. All right. So back to our Twilight Masquerade spoilers. Fighting's got some. Again, I'm going to keep using the word interesting here. Fun, cute, interesting. Some stuff to play around with. So there's this new Ting Lu, and it has the ground crack attack. So one energy, you do 30. And if you have a stadium in play, you do 30 to all of your bench Pokemon. So you're spreading 30 to everything on a basic with 140 HP, which is a great rate. The problem is you have to discard a stadium if there happens to be one in play. The issue with this becomes you're a spread deck, and if you're playing against Bench Barrier, you have to have Silent Lab around to get rid of Bench Barrier. So if you're playing Silent Lab and then you try to spread with Ting Lu, you're getting rid of the tool that helps you stop Bench Barrier and to spread. So it's not great in that capacity. And Fighting has some really good other stadiums too, like Brooklet Hill to help it search Pokemon. It's got the dojo to help it increase damage, especially if it's behind on prizes. So, like, this ground crack attack comes at a real cost. Then you throw in the fact that, well, there's Palisand that already exists. It's a stage 1. And for 1 energy, it's also doing 30 to everything. Like, that card's pretty good too. So, like, do you play Ting Lu and Palisand in a fighting spread deck together? Yeah, probably. Are you going to be sad when you discard your Silent Lab? Yeah, probably. But is it still worth it to play it? Yeah, probably.
I think there's actually a couple ways you can go about it. I'm not an expert on fighting. A couple times I've tried it. I always wanted to play this one stadium card called Scorched Earth, which lets you discard a fire or a fighting to draw 2. The problem and the reason I hated it is then when it went to my opponent's turn, freaking everything plays fire energy now. Colorless, even some metal. It's like, well, I don't want to give this to my opponent. So this is kind of funny. Ting Lu could solve that. Are you a madman that runs 4 or 5 stadiums? On paper, that sounds bad, but maybe that's worth trying. Um, a really important thing I think is the 140 HP and the fact that it is a basic. It's funny it has the same HP as Palestine for the 140, but really important math is getting over that 180. So being able to run Bravery Charm and the second Bravery Charm, whatever that's called, Cape of Toughness, to hit with the 190 while not giving up an extra prize, that's huge. Like, to me, it sounds game winning to be able to do 60 to everything for 2 turns with just 1 Pokemon and giving up 1 prize. But the real challenge is you have to find 2 stadiums. I think this card's really cool.
Well, why do 60 over 2 turns when you can just do 60 in 1 turn with Hitmontop? Just saying. Just play Hitmon Bros, man. Um, I think that there will be a cool fighting spread deck that maybe like comes into being after Ting Lu gets printed, which, pre-release is already out at the time of us talking about this, so get your Ting Lus now. But there's a Hitmonlee that does 10 and switches to the bench, so you could play that with some dolls. As far as playing stadiums, I mentioned a couple: Brooklet Hill, Dojo. If you're playing a spread deck, you might consider playing things like Frozen City to make your opponent's energy attachments do more damage to their bench Pokemon too. So, like, is getting rid of a Frozen City that big of a deal? No, like, you can play it down, ground crack it, get rid of it, and then if you use it in a situation where it's beneficial, great, but it might just be fodder to put into your discard. As far as Silent Lab goes, you can get it back. Like, Lusamine is a card that every fighting spread deck, like Hitmon Bros, has to play Lusamine because Silent Lab is core to what the deck is trying to do. So, all right, you discarded Silent Lab with Ground Crack. Well, hopefully you have a Lusamine in hand and you get it back and you can get rid of that bench barrier. Most bench barriers that give fighting a problem have 60 or 70 HP, so you got to make sure you run that Halucha too, so you can put that extra 10 damage on Manaphy. And I think the fighting spread deck, pretty good.
Yeah, for fighting.
All right, the card that everyone's excited about.
Woo!
Okie dokie. And Okie dokie looks really good. Adrenaline Power ability says that if it has a dark energy attached to it, it gets 100 more HP and 100 more damage. And then on top of that, its Good Punch attack costs 2 fighting energy and it does 70. So the cool thing with this card is that you can play Rainbow Energy that count as the dark energy, but also provide a fighting energy when you go to attack to meet the cost. So you don't need an extra dark attachment. Just use your special energy and it still only costs 2. So with 2 attachments, you basically get a 230 HP Pokemon hitting for 170 where most of the format, in terms of weakness, you've got dark, you've got lightning, you've got colorless, are already weak to. Like this Okidogi is looking pretty strong.
This card is game changing. This was one of the first ones we messed with for the new set, and actually not because I was that convinced on it. I need to get my fighting badge. So I was like, well, let me try it out. I completely changed my tune on it after trying it. I'm about 20 games deep into this thing. So to get into our build, I'm only playing 8 different monsters. I essentially took an earthquake deck and I changed it to make it more focused on Okidogi while still keeping the power of earthquake, which is just the fact they're low maintenance attackers that can out aggro your opponent. So having things like the Sada's package with Slitherwing and Great Tusk, the Don fan that can do 120 for one, and their Avenged Lucario that for one energy hits 150. And then don't take me too seriously on this one, but the Cloth that for a double colorless and fighting and the Curry can do 170. Probably take out those 2 cards and something else, put in the Machamp line if you want to be serious or competitive. But I like to have my fun. We're in Baltimore. I'm gonna play the Grump. This card's amazing. It's like we have a Snorlax now for fighting because you can play just those 8 Pokemon. They're easy to find and set up. But you can play Revive, you can play Rescue Stretcher, you can play the Rod to refine it. So he's easy to set up there. You can play 3 special energies that count as Rainbow. Really 3.5 because you have Prism, you have Rainbow, and you have the Unit Energy. And then you can also play Counter Energy. Funny enough, that's the card I've been thinking about cutting the most because the fighting's benefit actually it really hasn't been playing from behind for the most part. You're normally taking the first kill. The other important thing too is the math modifications. So both in terms of the attack, the 170 sometimes does fall short. So for example, I mentioned in our water deck we play the wishy-washy that's 180. Hilariously, that's a huge problem. You need to have the extra 10 damage. But you have the Martial Dojo, you have that fighting special energy that adds 20 damage, and then we play the muscle band too. So having those 3 different damage modifications helps. You play the Guzma and Hala to be able to help find that. So that way you can find your special energies. You can recycle those special energies with special charge. So you're effectively going from 3.5 to 5.5 special energies to set it up. You have the Raihan. So that way, even though it's a 2 energy, you can use that. And then Palpad versus Seeker, ways to reuse it. Because fighting isn't very consistent, I play things like Pokegear, uh, what's that one called? Random Receiver, just everything that can kind of turbo through, Trainer's Mail, everything to turbo through to try to find those draw supporters because drawing is so important. The new Carmine helps out with that as well, which is discard your hand, draw 5. I think this is honestly a real deck, and I'm really excited about it. Um, I'd say just the only downside, the thing it's weak to is Silent Lab and Hexmaniac. But my answer to that is make them have it. The other thing that it's weak to is it is inherently weak to Psychic. I think the right way to play it is just take the loss to it. Honestly, all your guys are going to be just kind of getting crushed by it. They will find their Hex when they want to because they have Gallade, and uh, that just is what it is. A lot of decks lose the Psychic. Fighting never really enjoyed that too much. But this makes it feel good into dragons, which that's something I never thought I'd have to say. But the Kakuna Rattata team, I had to message them Monday before our stream. I'm like, how do I help make the dragon matchup stronger into fighting? Because from our testing, it did like 4 into 10.
Awful.
Yeah, it did awful. And I never thought I'd say that about fighting to anything, not to be a fighting hater. Going back on a thing too, the 230 HP is great because you don't have to play Luxurious Cape. So you still want some damage modifications. Like in ours, we play Bravery Charm and Rock Chestplate. And that really helps too, because then the turns that they have the Silent Lab or the Hex Maniac, they still have to do more than the 130, or they have to find those 2 cards and Field Blower. And that's a little bit of a tall ask. And because it's not Luxurious Cape, you're still just giving up 1 prize. So this is just the beginning, and I'm already super really happy with this card and the results. I think I saw in Brazil and Japan, a couple people have gotten some wins with some really cool builds. There's a Japanese build that got a win with the Lucario and the Garchomp where you can search whatever card with it. So I'm rambling about this, but it's because this is probably the card I'm the most excited about. That's a Pokemon. I think this really changes fighting for the good, and it's nice to have a Snorlax. It is a little bit worse than Snorlax, but for fighting, I think this is a huge game changer.
Yeah, I think this is the best card in the set. You've rambled a lot about it. I don't really have to say anything else about it.
So, a couple things I'm going to say. I do not think that this card is as game changing for fighting as people think it's going to be. And I think that a build specifically built around Okidogi is not inherently consistent enough to recur it. So those are the things that I've noticed in my testing. Because there's one card I've tested more than any other card in the set. It is Okidogi. The problem always comes to this. You can't play counter energy because counter energy, once you go even on prizes, doesn't provide dark anymore. So all of a sudden, you're not at 230 HP, you're back to 130. So counter energy is not a good energy to use in this deck. I'd much rather use Unit, Aurora, and Prism, like you mentioned. 170, like you mentioned too, sometimes not enough. And because you're kind of building your deck around Okidogi and other cheap, efficient attackers, you do need those damage mods. And it's just hard to run damage mods in fighting when you're just not consistent. You mentioned, Muscle Band and the energy, but I think you might even need to go further than that and run cards like Professor's Kukui. People are running Grant. I hate Grant more than any other card in fighting, but people are running Grant to help with some of those damage boosts because people are playing the Sledgehammer Buzz Swole as kind of like another attacker in these builds that does like 120 damage if your opponent has 4 prizes. So like those are cards I see people running in their builds. Whether you're trying to recur Okidogi in a turn, you're fighting. You're not finding the cards you need, which is why that list that won in Japan was playing the Garchomp and Lucario, which is a 5-card combo to go and get a card from your deck, which can be tough to set up. So I don't know if I see Okidogi being like its own archetype and answer in fighting. I think what it does do really nicely is, and I'm going to mention my deck, Hitmonbros. Hitmonbros, with just a couple modifications here and there, all of a sudden you have like a second win condition outside of your normal spread game plan. Like getting the Hitmon combo through is back breaking. And now Okidogi on its own can be back breaking. So now you have these kind of 2 divergent strategies, and your opponent doesn't know which angle to hit you. So I do think that Okidogi's best spot in Gym Leader Challenge is going to be an already existing Hitmonbros shell. And if you're looking for one, please go check out Andre Costella's list. He's already got it up there. He's like 20-0. He's already got a tournament win with it because his locals let him run it early in Portugal. So like that's the list I think is going to be the best. I have not been impressed with only Oki builds, as I've called them.
I'm gonna contest it. I don't know which one's the best. I don't spend too much time on fighting, and I actually have complete. I like never net deck, but I did net deck Costella's Hitmon deck because that deck has just been putting up results everywhere, and it's fun. I love spread stuff. That deck is sick. I don't know which one is better. This is the best Earthquake has ever felt to me with the Okidogi. I say it's an Okidogi deck, a little bit in tongue in cheek, but it's the same way that Turbo Colorless is a Snorlax deck. Your other options are fine, like being able to do the 120, the 160, the 150. That's honestly good enough in a lot of cases, but you can recur them like twice, and that's normally enough to be able to win with it. To be honest.
Yeah. I mean, Don Fan is strong. Like Earthquake has its moments. I have always thought that Earthquake is a terrible deck, and people are going to hate me for it. Please do. Please do. I love your deck. I have not had particular success with it, and I've had a lot of success with Hitmonbros. I don't know. I'm hoping I'm wrong on this one, and I hope that builds centered on Okidogi work really well. But I like just slotting it into existing lists. The one list that it probably won't find itself into that's already an existing archetype is Colossal. It just doesn't work well in that specific build because you don't want to be running so many special energies because you need a certain amount of fire and fighting to be able to attach from your discard pile. So like Garganackle didn't get any better. But you go look at the other list, what Earthquake has become. Earthquake got a huge bump up. It was probably, D tier before, and it's probably C tier now. So, if that's what you're excited about, hooray. But I think Hitmonbros, again, a lot of bias here. I know it, but I think Hitmonbros is the way to go with it.
I'm gonna put Earthquake in B tier. I think.
I know you were.
I actually don't have strong attachments to it. I'm really surprised early on with our first 20 games with it.
Part of it might be too, like when I queued up to play some people in webcam matches, my first 6 matches or whatever, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit. I think it was probably closer to 4 or
yeah,
5.
You said you hit Psychic, right?
Where it was straight Psychic. And Okidogi was pretty
You
impressive.
just lose that.
But I've had Okidogi on turn 2 in almost every single game I've played. And that's like the most impressive thing about it is it's just so easy to use. The hardest part is just like how do you recur it in fighting that literally has no way to go and find cards? That's why
Yeah, I think the answer. I'm sorry to ramble about this, but I've been surprised too. I think the answer is just to play a lot of consistency cards and having that. Once you find that right amount of like draw support, kind of the same way we talked about the harder cards with the dragon provides, but just like keep like discarding through like research, Carmine, Sadas, Corina, like just play the stuff. I even play one greens because this is the only Pokemon in my deck with an ability, so it's not a big deal. But just like just filter through and just like trash through everything. And I think a card that's really important in Earthquake is Pal Pad that I don't see too much because being able to then put those back is important. And I have to update my list online as I'm looking at it. But I cut N and Iono for the Carmine that I mentioned in the Marnie because so there's not really that huge comeback in terms of hand disruption, but it's just so that way you can always just have a good amount of cards in there.
yeah.
But I'm excited to see where it goes. I could definitely be wrong. Fighting is not one of my stronger decks. I just have to figure it out selfishly because I need to get the fighting badge. And I know it can just fall on the Hitmon's list if this fails me, but I've been really surprised with it so far.
Yeah. Well, I
And
really
I should
like
talk about some of the stuff outside of supporters, just things like bicycle and acrobike and things like that too. I'm trying to just get through the deck as much as I can.
yeah. Well, I really like the Marnie switch for the N and Iono because fighting is a deck that likes to stay ahead. So that's definitely something I consider when I do my builds. Marnie is the first hand disruption spell that goes into all my fighting list for that exact same reason. It's always 5 cards and it always disrupts my opponent down to 4. Whereas like N and Iono can be used to blast me on the other hand. I absolutely hate Pal Pad. I know you mentioned Pal Pad as being a great card for you. I absolutely hate Pal Pad in fighting, and you will never see me run Pal Pad because once you put the cards back into your deck, you can't find them. Like you're putting 2 cards back into your deck that you'll never get to see before you lose the game, and that's how I felt about Pal Pad and fighting. Is like I'm putting them back in my deck. Okay, hope I get to draw them
It's fine.
again.
I haven't had that experience. For me, it's like putting back like Sada and Professor's research. It's just like, okay, I'm like less susceptible to an Iono now. It's funny because I wasn't sure about Pal, Pad, and GLC for the longest time. I was always like, we have Versus Seeker, who cares? And when I net decked the original Fishy Jump list that had it, it kind of put a light bulb on my a light bulb off, I guess, whatever the
Mhm.
term is, because that was working so well, and I thought, huh, that's really interesting. And so I kind of tried it on a whim for this deck because the original one before Okidogi had to use Sada so much, and that deck kind of stunk. That was like a D
Mhm.
tier, F tier deck. But with this, it's Palpat's really helped with the consistency, and I'll just say, frankly, I haven't had a problem with the recursion for him too. So
Okay.
I think just having sort of a streamlined thing with only 8 monsters and then a bunch of turbo stuff, kind of like a similar thing with extreme speed or some other turbo stuff. But I think it's interesting. It's not even earthquake anymore because there's only one guy in there that has earthquake as an attack, but it's just sort of like low maintenance aggro of okay, I'm gonna run you off the board before you set up, or if we trade 1 for 1, if you don't have a comeback mechanic, I kill you first before you kill me.
All right. Well, maybe I need to try it out because I do like Pal Pad a lot. You mentioned Fishy's Jump. It's great with like Octillery when you can draw onto the cards you put back, or it's great with Gallade or Dragonite Fast Call when you can put that supporter back into your deck and immediately go get it. So maybe I need to give it another chance. Are you running Pokestop in your fighting build?
I'm not, but I'm considering it. It's because I have Brooklet Hill Martial Art Dojo. I guess that's it. So I probably could run the Pokestop. I just so many times I was milling the energies that I didn't want to, like the special energies and things like that. I've actually kind of calmed down on the Pokestop a lot lately. Although it's funny because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16. I have 23 item cards, so I probably could run it in that, but I don't know. Maybe in my old age, I'm becoming more conservative and not wanting to get rid of energies. But like, even though I have that special charge, I really don't want to give up a special energy or a supporter because a lot of the times those those turbo cards are really just so I can find a supporter. So like, I'm chilling if I find a supporter. Like my Pokegear hits research or Karina or whatever. That's fine. That's all I needed to do for the turn. I just need to make sure I do that next turn.
Hmm.
So
No,
that's kind of been my philosophy on it.
that's why I've decided no item based build for Pokestop was the special energy. So I'm glad that we agree on that point, although we do have some differences
Yeah.
of opinion from there. All right. Speaking of Earthquake, hey, new Sand Slash. Fighting colorless does 120 and then 10 to the bench. If you're an Earthquake enjoyer and you're looking for some Earthquake synergies, this Sand Slash pretty reasonable. It does have like maybe the least amount of HP in terms of similar Pokemon. Donphan's 150, Wish Cash is 140. There's a pretty sweet Sand Shrew that stops cards from being put back into opponents' deck. I think, I can't remember the exact. I actually have it right here next to me. So it's Sand Shrew with the Sand Screen ability. Trainer cards in your opponent discard pile can't be put back into your deck, so they actually can't use things like Pal Pad in that situation with the Sand Shrew. So niche use, but might be good against item based builds or control decks. So
There
Sand
goes my
Slash,
pal pad.
right? Sand Slash might be pretty playable. And then you've got some synergies in other fighting cards. Like there's the Steelix that does more damage based on damage counters on it. And there's the Galarian Runerigus that does damage counters based on the amount of damage counters on it. It's basically the Lost Mine attack, but for each damage counter on it. So if you're looking for a specific Earthquake build, this might be a card you consider to play.
Sandshrew is my favorite Pokemon. If you guys are watching on video, I have Sandshrew tattooed on my bicep. And I'll tell you too, Pokemon tattoos, best way to find the real people in the gym when they notice that. Uh, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you play the anti-control Sandshrew, then it's neat to be able to evolve into the Sandslash. I don't think it's that good, but it's worth picking up just to have it. If an Earthquake deck ever makes sense, I think you hit all the right points on that. If you play the Rune, how do you say it? The Rune Pokemon.
I think he said it correctly. I can never say it. So
Runerigus, the Galarian Runerigus.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
there you
this
go.
So
guy.
there's like a couple different outlets. Yeah, that guy. But as I rambled about for 5 minutes, I kind of moved away from Earthquake and just going low maintenance. They used to be synonymous, and they're kind of not anymore. I like the term lo-fi. I've seen on Cardboard Warriors.
Oh yeah, lo-fi. Well, all right. Probably the card that I just don't know about yet is Hisuian Arcanine here. So 130 HP. If your opponent, or no, sorry, if you have a benched Pokemon with damage counters on it, it does the 30 base damage plus an additional 90. So pretty useful. Plus, that attack is just free. So free 30 damage, possible free 120. And then some recent synergies that have come out is there's the Great Tusk that just got printed with the Wrathful Charge attack. One fighting, two colorless. It does 80 plus 80 more if any of your bench Pokemon have damage counters on them. And then throw that with the Roaring Resolve Lucario, which lets you search up a fighting, attach it to Lucario, and put damage counters on it. So if you're running that Lucario, you're always going to have something for both Great Tusk and this Hisuian Arcanine. I just don't know. Like it could be good. Like 120 for free is pretty good, but I haven't found the right build for it yet.
Yeah, I mean it's 120 for free, but it has to evolve. It's a stage one, and it's only doing 120, which is so often not enough anymore. Going into a lot of these popular decks, so I don't know. It doesn't seem quite good enough to me. And it's conditional, right? Like you have to have a Pokemon with damage counters on it.
Yeah.
So if
What if it was 160?
it was 160, it'd be a different story.
I think that's
Oh,
where I'm at.
if it was 160, it'd be busted. If it was 140, it'd be busted. Like, I mean, the great thing about it being free in fighting is that, like, I mentioned previously, it's hard to find the cards you need sometimes. So and it's also hard to chain attackers if you can't find the cards you need. So if you can have a free attack, you can attach your energy elsewhere for turn and then potentially set up like a different attack. But hit it right on the head. 120 isn't good enough. It's going to need a damage mod potentially. It needs other support. You can oddly enough, just set this up with one rainbow energy because rainbow energy damages the Pokemon it attaches to. So like there are some like other ways besides this Lucario. This Lucario is really good at what it does. So I don't know. Time will
I think it's
tell.
supposed to partner in Okidogi. And so my philosophy was I'm gonna try it without it, and then if I feel like I need that one turn to attach to the Okidogi and then attack with someone I'm not attaching to, I'll put them in. I have not felt that in about 20 games.
Okay. Well, all right. Keep
But
trying it out.
I think the number is 160. I think for stage 1, I want it to hit, like, 160.
That's a
Yeah,
lot.
and as you said with fighting, it's hard to find things, so you're having to find, especially if you're playing the Lucario as well, you have to find the Rylo, the Lucario, the
That's the other
Grappling,
thing.
the
You're giving
Arcanine.
up the Lucario that hits for 150, which is close to my
Yeah.
160 number, but it's just like I don't think the numbers are there for modern.
In my experience, again, I'm playing mostly in a Garganacl build. This Lucario has hit for like 300 damage at times. So I'm not worried about this Lucario hitting any damage because one energy attached to it plus the energy it gets from deck is hitting for 130. So you're only missing out on 20 damage for a one attachment effectively. And then if you attach another energy to it, you're hitting for an additional 60, so you can hit higher than 150. So I'm not worried about this Lucario not being able to hit certain numbers. But the losing the revenge Lucario is a deal in a lot of fighting builds. But I'm okay with this one, especially in Garganacl builds. The problem with this Arcanine is there's another Arcanine that hits that 160 number if it has a fire energy attached. It is a 3 energy cost attack, but with Garganacl and Colossal, you're doing that in one turn. So it hits 160 and it burns, which is 180. So I think I'm still going to play that Hisuian Arcanine over this one, and that is like maybe the only place I would really want to play this anyway. So I just don't know. So if you're listening at home on Spotify or YouTube, and you've been testing this card and it's been killing it, tell me down below again in the comments how you feel about Hisuian Arcanine, specifically this one from Twilight Masquerade. All right, Halucha, he good. It's 2 energy, 50, and if you're behind on prizes, it does additional damage. It looks like I cut it off here. I think it's an additional 90, so I think it's hitting 140. So it's pretty sweet. Oh, you can see it on the card there, 90. So it is 140 if you're behind on prizes for 2 fighting energy. So this card's pretty sweet since you're already effectively down on prizes when this card is useful. Counter energy powers it up. All right, and so just 1 energy attachment gets this card going. It's only got 70 HP, but let's be honest, you're not really expecting it to survive anything anyway. And then because you're also down on prizes, you can throw down a martial arts dojo, which is also going to boost that by 40 if you have a fighting energy attached, any basic fighting energy attached too. So it works well with cards that fighting already plays. Just, I don't know, it's good, I guess, but I just don't know where it fits too. It's tough to see where it fits.
It's tough because in the fighting deck I've been testing, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to cut the counter and add like Aurora or something anyway. So it's tough. And then in Hitmons, you got to play the other Halucha, right? The one that does the 10 damage to the 2. So it's definitely a good card. Time will tell where it fits in, I think.
Yeah. It's got sweet art. I think that my favorite part is like he's jumping in the moonlight. Like, I mean, come on, you could sing that song, dancing in the moonlight, like while you play this card, and people will love that. So, but
What
it's
song
just
was it? What song was he singing?
is it dancing in the moonlight? But anyway, that's the song.
That was beautiful.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm a soprano at heart. All right, Dark. Moving on from fighting to Dark. Can we go ahead and say I think fighting got the best cards so far in Twilight Masquerade? I know we mentioned Okie Dokie, but I do think fighting's got some of the coolest tools from this set. Much needed. I don't know if it fixed any of the issues that fighting had because I still just want to draw some cards, but we got good attackers. Dark got a very interesting card in this Brute Bonnet, and this Brute Bonnet is pretty, curious. It's an ancient Pokemon, which could be relevant at some point. 1 energy, poison. So poison dark exists as a deck. And then for 3 dark energy, it does Rattling Strike, which does 50 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So after things have been damaged by poisoned and switched in and out, this could clean up something. 3 dark is a steep cost. And since it's a basic, you can't use reversal energy on it, but there's a chance that you use its second attack here. Other dark poisoners that exist are Galarian Wheezing, which is a stage 1, but it has the Ascension ability on the coughing, so not too hard to evolve, with basically ability lock and then poison plus a poison multiplier. So Galarian Wheezing's just the best poisoner out there. And then comparable Pokemon is Seviper here. Seviper also for 1 energy poisons, but it does the Venoshock attack, which is 60 plus 120 if the active is poisoned, but it's double colorless energy compatible. So I don't know if you play the Brute Bonnet when Seviper exists.
Yeah, I will say that Poison Dark is my favorite version of Dark to play. I don't think it's necessarily great, but I think it's very fun. Um, I don't think that this is the Brute Bonnet you use. Its energy cost is just a little too steep. At least with the Viper, you can attach a twin energy, double colorless, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
Um, so it's like only really a 2 energy attach, whereas this is 3, which is steep and dark, which doesn't have an energy.
You
Um,
just have dark patch, but you can only use it once.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
the Hydreigon. There's the
There.
Hydreigon that looks at the top cards and attaches.
Okay, not in Poison Dark.
So, like we said, there's no acceleration in dark.
Um, and I think you play the other Brute Bonnet instead, which I don't remember exactly. It's like a tool, and then it does an automatic poison thing. I think it synergizes better with poison than this Brute Bonnet does.
Yeah, and I know that's a little bit of a hot take because there's like a muck or something that's a more consistent poison if
It's a
you have a stadium.
Garbodor, and I
Garbodor,
think
yeah.
Garbodor should also be played in the
Yeah, but
championship.
yeah, we tried the Brute Bonnet, and there's like Adventure's Bag to find the capsule, and then Lana's Rod to recover that. And it's just nice because then in your first turn, there's a Sableye that does like what 90 if they're poisoned for 1 energy. So it's a little bit more turbo, kind of keeps up. Like you said, I don't think Poison Dark's the best way to play Dark, but it's something that we spent more time on than we probably should have. And
Because I like it the best.
yeah, yeah. And the
I
other
mean,
Brute Bonnet's actually pretty cool.
yeah. I mean, I love me some Poison Dark, so I'm hoping. I think again, not to spoil spoilers, but there's another dark card coming out in the next set that's getting released in August. That's pretty good if you haven't seen it yet. So we'll hold off on that because we need as much content as we can get for the future. But keep your eyes out for the future. That's it for Dark. Moving on to Metal. Metal got an interesting card in this Aggron here. So for 1 metal energy, it does Angry Slam, which is 50 times the amount of damage counters on it. But the cool attack is this Guard Claw, which does 120 damage for 1 metal and 2 colorless, and then it takes 50 less damage on the return attack. So Metal has this kind of like tank and heal kind of like sub theme to a lot of what it's doing. So there's a Heatran that also has the Guard Claw. There was another Aggron that was slightly worse than this one that's getting printed too. And then of course you always have Caparaja here, which is like another big stage 190 HP that also like does big damage. But if it has 8 damage counters on it, it does nothing. So like you're already having to run like heal cards or damage reduction cards in these decks. So having this Aggron might be pretty cool. And I know there's people brewing with it. Of course, we always talk about the steep cost of evolving, and here's a stage 2 in Metal.
I know this is a card you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever play Metal, so I probably don't have the right to say anything about Metal decks. I've never played Metal GLC. But I thought that this card did sound very interesting. I actually thought that the first attack sounded good as well because 50 times even 2 is or 3 is kind of nice. Um but yeah, with the second attack, especially with how easy energy acceleration is in Metal,
Yeah.
I think this card has potential. The downside, of course, is that it's going to be a stage 2, but it's at least a bulky stage 2. That
Yep.
gives you a little bit of something.
Yep. And like you mentioned, acceleration is pretty easy. You've got Metang, you've got Bronzong, and then you've got even Magnezone if you wanted to attach to an active that was tanking hits. Those are all ways that Metal can accelerate energy. So getting to 3 energy is not so hard. And then, of course, you got Reverum to help you draw cards these days. So maybe Tanky Heal is back on the menu for Metal. All right. Metal got another Heatran. We talked about it in the last slide. We're talking about it in this one. This Heatran's pretty interesting. And I looked at it first and I was like, is it as good as the other Heatran that just, does 160 if it has a fire energy attached? And then I kept looking at it. I'm like, maybe. So it has the incandescent body ability, which states if it's in the active and if it's damaged, your opponent's Pokemon is burned. So it's basically an attack deterrent as a basic with 140 HP. Pretty interesting. Then it's attack. Again, it's that same energy cost I mentioned before. It's metal and double colorless. You discard all metal energy, and then you do 50 for each you've discarded. So if you get up to that, 3 energy cost on it, you discard them all, you're doing 150, which is only 10 less than the other Heatran. Plus, you have the burn, which is an additional 20. So when you think about it, this card is doing more work, and you don't have to play the fire energy.
And this has the best art of the set, I think. The Heatran looks so fierce, although you don't like it because it's not
I
that cute.
really like
Yeah,
Heatran.
it's one of your favorites, which is
It's
such
one
a
of the
weird favorite
yeah, I think it's
Pokemon.
really awesome. It makes me sad that all of these Heatran arts just make it look so angry because I think it's a very cute Pokemon. But it's like, it's all screamy. It's not like Heatran is.
He's
Heatran's
just a little
adorable.
lava frog.
It's
Lava
like a
frog.
salamander. He has a tail. It's a salamander.
Oh, it's a salamander, excuse me. Yeah, okay.
Or gecko, actually.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. I think the one thing that is really nice about the Heatran, because the original Heatran, I was a hater on because I didn't want to play the fires, and I finally tried it, and I ended up getting my badge with playing it in the compressor and all that stuff. And I will say the thing that really won me over on it is that it is passive. So, because I feel like a big problem with metal is you're susceptible to hex, even though you probably play it yourself. But like you have to kind of set up every turn. You got to draw up the cards. You got to hit a metal maker normally, a bronzong, blah blah blah. So the nice thing is, like, if you survive a turn, you don't have to do anything with that one. And this doesn't solve that. I'd say another thing too is metal doesn't have a huge problem with damage in some ways because you have the Zamzenta that does 220, but that is a revenge one. You have unlimited damage with Dialga, but that's kind of hard to build up. So that's kind of the trade-off with this. Is this one you have an unlimited damage potential, and with acceleration being so easy, you can easily hit the 200s, even the 300s if you really want to go crazy. But it doesn't have the passiveness that I really like by the other one. However, I think a lot of people will be like how I was originally, where it's just like I don't want to play fire in my stinking metal deck. Uh, I think I think the original Heatran is still better, but I think this one's worth trying.
And I'm going to slightly disagree because I think that this one might be better if you're running Matang because you need those metal energy counts to be pretty high. And so, is playing fire or a special energy like Aurora or Rainbow, like that's messing with your Matang math. So, is this one worth a try? I don't know. I'm with you. I'm kind of still flip flopping, but I think that I would try this one for those reasons I just said to make your Matang hits slightly better, which can be the difference between the games here and there.
I'll say too, before this podcast, I didn't realize until you're talking about the ability how good it is. With metal, it's not a deck that plays greens anyway, so that's actually really nice. Having a 140 that then punishes you or punishes your opponent for hitting into you. That actually is a pretty nice plus too,
Yeah.
because those little things can sometimes matter. That 20 damage or whatever in the beginning.
Oh yeah. All right, colorless. Colorless didn't get a whole lot. Whew, thank you.
Woo!
But Color's got a cute card. I love Farfetch'd, and I love
Yeah.
Galarian Farfetch. I wish there was a very playable one in fighting. There's one that's like on the edge, but not quite. But this card is pretty cute, and I actually really like this card a lot. I just don't think it's gonna see play because it's not particularly useful in what it does. So this Farfetch'd has the Sonic Duty ability, and basically when you bench it, you go and get a tool and you attach it to it. So it's pretty cool because you could, if you have a way to get it into the active, because you have to bench it in order to get the ability, you could get Turbo Energize onto it, put it into the active, and then Turbo Energize instantaneously, which is what a lot of colorless decks want to do. Of course, you have to have the switch, and you can't use the energy to switch because you'll need that energy for Turbo Energize because Turbo Energize discards itself. So is it going to happen often? Probably not. But I think it's actually kind of cool because, like, if you're playing against opposing decks that like to do turbo energized sorts of things, this is just a tutor for Tool Jammer, and you can just stop your opponent's tools from working because Pokemon search is so much easier than tool searches. So I think that, like, this, if there ever becomes like a tool control deck or like a toolbox deck, like, toolbox deck, this would be
Uh,
a card that you would use in that. Its attack is also pretty interesting because for one colorless energy, it does 30 and it discards a special energy. So if you think of this also as like an enhanced hammer that tutors up a tool and gives up a prize, then like maybe there's enough there for it to do something. but I just don't see where it fits into the Gym Leader Challenge format of the moment.
I think one deck I could see it in is the Porygon, the Crazy Code deck. Sometimes finding a uh Crisis Punch at the end of the game can be tough. You might already be down your Guzman Hollow or something like that. And so the energy acceleration for the 3 isn't a problem, but being able to just slam this down, because like you said, Pokemon Search is easier to immediately get the Crisis Punch for that game winning 280. That's neat. Um, it's a cool card. It's another one that I don't think there's anything else like it, so I think it's worth picking up now, or maybe not in something in this meta. Although, like I said, I think it's decent in Crazy Code. The Turbo Energize is definitely like an obvious thing that's really cool too. Um, it's a neat card. If you already played Bunnelby, this probably takes the place of it, which I don't know how I feel because I love Bunnelby, which I know interestingly isn't a huge thing online, but I love Bunnelby. The attacking twice with a crisis punch, that is more game winning, but this guy finds it easier. So there's like a trade off there. I think
Yeah.
it's a cool card.
Yep. And he's got a leak.
Yeah. Oh, and he's one of my favorites. But so we're shiny hunters. We have all but 5 of the Kanto Pokemon shinies. Is that accurate? Is it about 5?
I think it's less than.
Might be less than that. Farfetch is the one that's eluding us. I've hunted him for probably like close to 20 hours, which is sad. I know. Don't judge me too much. You can judge me. I don't care. This guy, I cannot find him. I've tried hatching him. I've tried Pokemon Go. I've tried Let's Go. Scarlet and Violet. Not Scarlet and
No.
Violet. But yeah, I love Farfetch'd. He doesn't like me. I cannot get a shiny of him for the life of me.
Yeah. I hope you find him someday. I hope the duck
Thanks.
doesn't elude you for too long. And I am judging you. All right. Next up, we got some trainers. So that was it for colorless. But the trainers in the set, I keep using the word. I'm going to keep using it because it's become the motif of the show. Interesting. So Bug Catcher's set here is a interesting card. You look at the top 7 and you can reveal up to 2 in any combination of grass energy or grass Pokemon and put them into your hand. So it's similar to like maybe like a Sonya that only looks at the top 7 cards, but you can do it in any combination. When I look at this card, I just have to ask myself, does grass really want all that energy in its hand? And does grass need any more help searching out grass Pokemon? And I just find myself going, probably not.
I'm on the other side right now, but I haven't tested it, so I might be wrong. This might age poorly. There's a lot of times where it's like I have my bench and I just really need that Grottle or that Grovyle to get things going. So I think it's cool that that kind of finds it out. It's completely dead, like once you're set up. But a lot of times grass plays off the board, so that doesn't matter as much, but it can matter. I actually think I'm pretty optimistic on this card. If I'm looking at the ratios, grass plays a heavy amount of Pokemon. That one you're probably above 16 because there's so many of them evolve. And then you probably play about 10 to 12 energy. So your odds are like 40%, I think, that, of your deck is something that you can find. So versus like a Great Ball, I think you're probably plus oneing off of this. I think you're probably hitting 2 cards in the early game. The energy I don't care about too much because Ball Guy can find you an energy with the net ball and stuff like that. But finding the evolution Pokemon, having another way to find that is really nice. And the fact that it's not your supporter for turn is really great too. Because you wouldn't play something like a Raise You in grass, but having like an extra worse evolution in sense is cool. This I might completely change on it. I haven't tested it. My plan's to play grass on Monday. Um, but I think I'm optimistic on it. How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well. I think that it could definitely help grass in the early game if it's struggling to set up, which I've seen and encountered before. Um, so yeah, I also think that it could be a good include for grass.
So, and I hear you both, and I understand the points, but I'm also just like imagining, like, okay, I've started Turtwig in the active, and I have no bench Pokemon, and my hand is kind of mopey, and I'm going first, and I play Bug Catcher set, and I have to look through the top 7 cards, and I'm looking, all right, hey, I got Ivysaur, I got Venusaur, and I've got Rillaboom are like the options, the hits that I get that I can put into my hand, which are not helping me put anything on my bench, and then my opponent just goes Zapdos, Hoopa, Donk. Like, that's what I'm picturing. Like, obviously, I mean, that's like a terrible situation, but I just feel like it's the same vein of like Poke Communication. Like Poke Communication needs you to have a Pokemon in hand to be able to swap, and then you're trading 2 cards for 1 card from your deck. Like Bug Catcher set could be just bad and like putting more cards into your hand that you don't want. I just don't know if grass needs any more help getting Pokemon into play because you got Grottle, some lists play Grovyle, you have all those basics with the attacks, Zarude with Pat Call, you've got the Cricketot with the ability Bug Hunch to search for 3 things, Turf Field, Artisan, you got all the balls, Ball Guy, some lists are even playing Apricorn Maker, Evo Incense. You got Roserade to go get a card. So, like, there's a lot of stuff in your deck dedicated to this. I mean, what's the cut? And is looking at just the top 7. I know we've all played Pokegear and whiffed it before. Like playing Bug Catcher, are you whiffing it and feeling good about it? I don't know. So I
That might be the problem. As the same way I'm up on Palpad, I am way up on Pokegear right now and stuff like Fishy Jump and Fighting. So that's probably what it is. As I'm like, man, Pokegear is really good. This will find me my Grottle. This card's great.
I love
Maybe with the
Pokegear.
right
Don't get me
audience
wrong. Love
setting.
Pokegear.
But yeah, for me, it's another timer ball, another evolution incense. But you're right. If it whiffs like the Grottle, then it's gonna kind of stink. The big difference with the Pokecom though, and the other stuff is it's faster too. Like items are just inherently better than attacking and trying to find your stuff. So it's the speed that's kind of interesting to me that you can set up that turn and get hopefully further ahead than your opponent.
All right. Yep. I'll definitely try it out, is what I'll say. But I'm not guaranteeing it a spot in any of my grass list.
Oh no! By the time this comes out, I might be disagreeing with myself already.
That's what it's about. And I might be wrong. I'm always happy to be wrong because I want these cards to be good because new cards are always cheaper.
It's true.
Um,
Yeah, and just like for the record too, like I don't think any of us are like married to our ideas or take it that seriously. It's fun discussion, of course.
Yeah.
of course. No, yeah. Well, the next card is got a lot of people hyped on it, and it's
Oh
Carmine.
yeah.
Um, so it's interesting because it's discard your hand, draw 5 is the effect of this supporter, but it has the little text that lets it break the rule. You get to play this card going first. So obvious comparisons come to Professor's Research, which is discard your hand, draw 7. This is slightly worse at a rate of 2 less cards, but playing it first. What are your thoughts on this?
I picked up 8. I'm really excited about this card. I think this goes in not the top tier decks. You don't put this in colorless, psychic, and water. You could put in some versions of water, but not like whales or something like that. But I think this is really cool in fighting. I think this is great in lightning. Probably gonna put this in fairy control for some of those hands where I just have to yeet it away. I think this makes like I'll just say inconsistent decks a little bit more consistent, and that's cool. And then for decks that use the graveyard as a resource, it's a great way to be able to help with consistency with that. Recently, we've been getting a lot of shuffle draw cards. And I used to be really into that Cynthia, Tate and Liza, Iono, and as I've been trying to figure out fighting a little bit more, I really like just the get it out of my deck because then when I get disrupted, I don't want to draw back into this. I want my deck to be small, small, small. I want to be able to get through things. And for a lot of decks, being able to go and do this on the first turn and break the rules really cool. I talk about Marshadow too much and Donks get mentioned sometimes, but this helps against that too, and that probably should be stated. The fact that if you go first and you only have one basic and you're going to get donked by dark, this gives you another out, another 5 outs to find the basic search. Or if you need to get more stuff down before Marshadow, that's going to happen less with Psychic going second and blah blah blah. But it's neat that you have that option. Um, and I think it's just one of those cards that can help a lot of like middle decks be just a little bit more consistent, and I think that's really healthy for the game because it helps it so more of us are playing the game and we have more like real games that get set up. And another theme of it being interesting is there's a lot of cards in the set that break the rules, and this is another one of that. And how fun is that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're really hyped on this card. I agree with you to a point. I have also stated that I don't like
Yeah,
discarding
you hate discarding cards.
cards.
She doesn't play research in any of her decks
No,
either.
I don't like research, so maybe that's on me. Um, but I can understand its pros. It's just a personal holdup, I think.
Well, I'm with you, Ray. I hate this card. I hate everything about this card. Um, I mean, it's a singleton format. like discarding your hand going first, like what if you're discarding your hand going first, why are you even playing the cards in your deck, right? Like it's a singleton format. You not like if you can't use those cards to set up and if you can't use them in the late game, then why are you playing them and then you're just deciding to discard them? So, like, I get the point that like it makes your deck maybe more consistent because there are going to be times when your hand isn't a certain way. But like the fact that you're going to get this card on the first turn, like first turn of your hand is around like 11%. I think is what like the math is, and then like the fact that you want to play it is also like probably less than that because you're probably going to have something else to do, like because you don't want to discard like an important piece that you're going to need later on that you can't get back. So like, why would you ever play Carmine ever? When you can just play Professor's Research because you never want to discard your hand on the first turn of the game. So that's where I'm at with it. I hate this card so much. And the deck that I would least play this in is most fighting builds because like you need like so many resources like and keep them so that you're not discarding them because you're not going to be able to get them back in fighting. I do think that this card sees play in lightning decks. And I know that you mentioned it's not going to see play in colorless decks, but I think the deck that might want it more than anything is colorless decks because you're going to be able to play your energy out. You have Nest Stash to like kind of like put some things on the bottom and get you just one card. And then you can, if you happen to draw in a Carmine, it's just, 5 more free cards. And then they're also playing so many like tech cards that might not necessarily be great in a certain matchup that like Carmine is like okay to play and like discard like Rhyme or like a Stadium like Chaotic Swell if it's not going to be useful. So that's what I see when I look at Carmine. But man, this card is so polarizing because like there are people that say it's great and then I'm over here being like it's awful and I hear both sides of it and I get both sides of it, but I'm not going to play it very much.
Well, now I need to get a ninth. With you mentioning Nest Stash with Squavit, I do see the colorless application now. That's pretty interesting. The the thing I would say is the first time we were on here, we were discussing not a ban, but a limitation on double colorless. And I'd say we're not really in a singleton format. We are more in theory. So, for example, if I have one of my rods in my hand or one of my recovery cards for fighting, I don't really care if I give that up. It kind of hurts, but I just have to be, and I have to be mindful. I don't want to give up like two of my three recoveries, but I can give up one of them because there's redundancy in GLC. So if I give up one of my attacking lines, I can recover it later. Giving up a special energy hurts, but you can play a card like Special Charge. I think a big difference too is specifically in fighting, I'm not playing stage twos. I'm playing a couple like two stage ones and mostly basics. So I just slam them down and then I Carmine it away the stuff I can't slam down. It's fine. But if you are a setup deck, like Grass would probably never play this, for example. Like something that's a heavy stage two. But if you're looking to turbo through, now, I gotta say, the deck I'm the most excited with this for this card is Cast Form. So, for those of you that don't know, I have a Turbo Cast Form deck because we had a challenge a couple years ago where we have something called PokeCon. We'll talk about that later. But no one went for fire or fighting badges, so we had to redo the event where everyone brought fire and fighting. I thought fire is so bad. I'm just gonna try to attack with Cast Form 6 times. So you have to have 8 stadiums in the discard, and then you have to discard a stadium every turn. But you do want 50. That even keeps up with modern times. And so if you get research or battle compressor, a couple other cards, you generally win actually in your opening hand. Carmine's another one of those cards. Hapu was one of those cards, and so is Explorer's Guidance. So it's still always going to be a meme, but Cast Form has never looked better. Thank you, Carmine.
And free water too for those people who enjoy that same style of deck with the other cast forms. Carmine's going to see play in those decks, but I like my cards. I put them in my deck because I'm going to use them, and so I'd rather keep them in my hand, especially at the beginning of the game. So I don't
Well,
know.
tell your cards they should have came at the right time of the game. Goodbye.
Get tough love over here. You're like hoping that you draw the right cards for Dragon, and the other side you're like your cards are bad cards. Love hate relationship. But all right, polarizing card for sure. Again, tell me I'm wrong in the YouTube comments. All
I
right,
rate that the second best card in the set, by the way. I think Okidogi's number one. I put this number two.
I have them both somewhere different, but to be discussed. All right, a trainer card I thought was super cute was this Fable Flute. And so the Fable Flute says, reveal the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto your bench. And then your opponent shuffles those cards back into their deck. And so I sent you this card because I was like, you're the Psychic Lost Zone guy. And we had been talking previously about how, like, people catch on to what Psychic Lost Zone is doing, and they know that your whistles and your horns are coming. And so they'll oftentimes use Super Rod or Ordinary Rod to shuffle cards back into your deck. Well, hey, if they're back in their deck, you could Fable Flute them onto the bench so that your Sableye can then take a 2-prize turn if it ends up being that way. So I thought that Fable Flute was cute. Again, Target Whistle and Echoing Horn are the 2 cards that are C play in Psychic Lost Zone decks. That get them from the discard and plop them on the bench. I feel like if your meta is getting wise and super riding cards back in, I think one of the horns could potentially drop, and you could Fable Flute them, which is just cute to say too, into a game win there.
That is a really cool application. The thing I'm the most excited for this for is definitely control builds. Something like Fairy Control or Doll Stall as it's called. Because same kind of thing. Sometimes they can play around a gosh, what's it called? Captivating cupcakes or Pokepuff or something like that, where it comes from the hand. Harder to play around it from the deck. So I think this is going to be an interesting card. It's a little bit of a high roll though, because 5 cards isn't a lot for Pokemon, especially because they can thin it out. But something I'm going to try in a couple control builds.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that you normally you're whistling your opponent's Pokemon in the late game too. So like Fable Flute would just fit into that same, like, maybe your opponent's deck is thin and you're hoping to hit it, but you're also just going to Lost Zone it if it's bad if you're playing a Lost Zone deck. I don't think the card is good by any means. I'm just thinking in the particular situation where your meta wises up to the fact that you're playing Target Whistle and Echoing Horn, this would be a cute way to get them.
Definitely.
All right, we've talked about it a bit. Festival Grounds, and again, it has all these synergies with some of the other festival Pokemon. The Diplin was one. We mentioned the Goldeen, the Thwacky needing a festival lead Pokemon in the active to search it up. So, Festival Ground, again, each Pokemon that has an energy attached can't be affected by special conditions, and you heal them. So, it's a heal stadium. It doesn't do a lot, but it does synergize well with those specific festival Pokemon. I still just don't think it's a thing.
It's worth trying. I think all of us will try it, but the only cute thing is that it can say, "Hey, Shock Lock, I'm okay this turn. I'm not paralyzed anymore." I don't know about you. We get hit with Shock Lock like once a season or so. Someone will come in with it. So
Never played against
you're really
Shocklock.
just playing it for Diplin. Oh, it's
Yeah,
miserable. I wouldn't recommend it.
yeah. Oh,
You normally still win too, but it's an annoying win.
I
But
figure.
anyway, yeah, you're really just playing it for Diplin and Thwacky.
Well, you play Fairy Control.
But that's the best way to play Fairy. There's all kinds of viable ways to play Lightning.
You know
That's
what?
my
You're
argument, but I'm
right. You're
sticking
right.
to it.
You're right. You win that argument. All right. Moving on. We get Jamming Tower. Pokemon tool cards have no effect in play, but essentially a reprint of Lysander Labs that doesn't see a lot of play. So we're going to reference it. It's here. We'll move on.
Good to know about because redundancy for consistency. But like you said, doesn't see play now. One of those things that might come up in the future.
Yeah. All right. And then Standard needed this because Clara rotated out, but Lana's Care is kind of just like a Super Rod supporter. So pick any 3 combination of Pokemon that don't have a rules box and basic energy and put them into your hand. Again, it's exactly Super Rod and GLC, but there's type specific cards like Nessa, Tulip, and then Clara, which is just a better rate. So maybe if your deck wants 2 of these effects that isn't already water or psychic, maybe you play them both, but I think you're always picking Clara over Lana's Care if you can.
You said it's like super rad, but I think these go to your hand, right?
Oh, they do go to your hand. You're right. You're right. So not quite
So that's
super run.
huge because it can be so that can be huge for decks that kind of have like 1 or 2 attackers and you need to recur it. Of course, some of the things that come to mind are like Sableye, where you have Clara and Tulip. But it's neat for something like I just mentioned, the cast form, where you need to recur your buddy once in a while. So it's neat because Well, it's like I said in the last one, we're not really in a singleton format, so it's like now you have a second option to Clara in decks that aren't psychic and water. So it's a redundancy
Yep,
for consistency.
for sure. All right, and then a card that's again cute, interesting. Ray Fort here. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You can discard any of those cards and put the other cards back in any order. So you mentioned Cast Form as a deck that might want to put some stadiums in the discard pile. Free Water is another deck, and then if you're like one of those decks like Matang that wants to kind of stack your top deck or organize your top deck in a certain way, Ray Fort might be an interesting way to kind of do that. Like if you don't have access to Mallow or the Cypher Maniac card, or if you're playing Max Elixir, maybe Gutsy Pickaxe, like some of these kind of more niche energy attachment cards that use the top of your deck to determine those things. Maybe even the Meta Gross that if it's on top of your deck and you draw it, you can plop it down and draw 3 cards. So Ray Fort can kind of smooth your draws, but like Rotom Phone exists, which like lets you rearrange the top 5 cards of your deck. So Ray Fort is there, but I think there might be better options.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna play this because there's item options.
Yep. Uh, that's it. That's all the cards that we thought together as a whole were the playable cards, or at least cards that might potentially see play in Gym Leader Challenge format. So since we're done with that, what are your picks? Z-Man, what's the most impactful? I'll say this to you too, Ray. What are our most impactful cards from Twilight Masquerade?
I think you can skip me on most impactful because I ranted on those both. So I'm gonna go right to you. But for me, it's Okie Dokie is number one. Rewind an hour if you miss that, and then it's Carmine number two. Rewind maybe 20 minutes if you miss that one.
I think it's gonna be Okie Dokie and the Zapdos
Hmm.
are my 2 picks personally.
Yeah.
What are your reasons too? Because I think I did most of the talking.
The
Surprise,
Okie
surprise.
Dokie, you rambled a lot, and I agree with you. The Zapdos, although you lose the Donk, I think that the amount that you hit for is really important for Lightning because Lightning doesn't have a lot of powerful hitters. So finally having that is potentially important for Lightning. I don't know for sure. We haven't tested it, but it seems like it has potential.
Yeah, and Lightning's running the Lux Ray that when you're behind on prizes, you can plop it on the bench, and it does 180 for 3, but it damages itself. So that Zapdos might just slot straight back into that spot. It's easier to get back, and you don't have to be down on prizes in order to play it. So again, that Lux Ray might just be the initial swap for that Zapdos if you go that route. I'm with you, Ray. Zapdos was one of my most impactful cards, and the other card was Walking Wake. Because I think anytime you have two basics that do huge damage, like 180, 190, which I'm considering Snorlax territory, like those cards are going to be wrecking other evolution decks in the format at a much cheaper cost. So that's what I think 2 cards that are going to show a lot of strength in this meta are going to be. Again, for the reasons you stated for Zapdos, and Walking Wake, just like, did water need a better basic? I don't think so. Overhyped cards. Where are you guys at with overhyped cards?
Everything in Dragon. Well, maybe not the Flapple, but the Drakloak and the Tatsugiri, I think, are overhyped. For sure. I'm in trouble remembering some of the other cards, honestly.
That's one you felt the most strongly about,
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think all of us wanted it to be good, and it might be, but you definitely have not been impressed with it in your own
right.
dragon build. For me, it's the Infernape.
Oh, that too. Yes.
And it breaks my heart because I've had people that like haven't really played GLC and like are coming in because the Infernape, and I don't. It's hard to have the heart to say I don't think the card's really good. But now I'm on a podcast talking about it, so I have to be honest. I don't think the card's really good for a lot of the reasons we talked about when we were reviewing it. It's another stage two. It's unfortunate, but Fire has the curse of like everything being good is a stage two except for the Macargo and the Salazzle. I don't think the damage is that great for the energy cost because for that energy cost you probably need like Charizard, which again hits the stage two thing. Um, I hope I'm wrong though. It'd be nice if Fire got a boost. Um, but I don't think it's it, unfortunately. And then like we talked about setting up the Camerupt, then you're putting in another kind of clunky Pokemon. And it's just so much can go wrong with this if something's prized. So I don't think it's there, but I do hope I'm wrong, honestly.
Yeah. Well, for me, and again, I'm a YouTube personality here, so I've got to say things, and I have to say them with certitude. Okie dokie is overhyped. Hear me out on this. Hex Maniac, Silent Lab, Enhanced Hammer. These are all cards that are going to wreck you. You're not going to have a good time. All right. Okie dokie doesn't solve any of the problems that fighting has. Like, fighting already was pretty fast at hitting you with big numbers. Don Fan hitting for 120 on potentially turn two. You had some of the other Earthquakers that could do the same thing. Palisand could hit for 30 and then 30 again over and over again. It never had really an issue with damage. So you're putting another big damage threat on the board. Well, it's not going to matter if you can't draw into your special energies. It's not going to matter if you can't recur it after someone knocks it out with their dinky psychic Pokemon because he's weak to psychic. So I don't think that Okidogi fixes any of the problems that fighting has had. And until we get a draw card, I don't think that you're going to see much of a difference between what you were doing with fighting before and what you're doing with fighting now. That being said, Okidogi is a busted card, but I do think that people think it's going to come in here and solve problems that fighting has had, and we're going to be like, it's good again. It's not. It's kind of where it's at. Um, and of course,
It's good again, but the psychic weakness, like you mentioned, is so tough. I do think you'd have a different impression of it if you didn't hit like 5 psychic decks when you're first trying it. I think that jaded you a little bit.
Well, it might have, but do you think does it solve any of the problems that fighting had? Like, I mean, how many times have you gone evolve into Don Fan, attach energy, and knocked out your opponent's Pokemon and been like, "Cool, we're on a roll here," and then all of a sudden they just have better card advantage and better they can find what they need at certain times. Like, even having weakness against colorless, they're still like seeing 7 cards a turn, and you're like, "I hope I top set something good." Like, I don't think it changes any of that aspect of what fighting has been, and it doesn't really make your mid to late game better. I think it makes your like early game pretty dope because again, just 2 energy attachments and you have this Pokemon that is capable of sweeping. I think you're going to see more of that from fighting. But on the whole, I don't think it's solving a lot of the issues. Again, those issues of consistency, drawing the right cards when you need them. It's going to feel very the same, but you're going to have a cool little dog to look at while you're losing.
I agree with you a little bit, but having gone up against Okidogi, what I found is that it took me a long time to take it out,
Yeah.
and it took a lot of kills while I was trying to take it out. So by the time I took it out, I only got 1 prize, but he'd already taken 3.
Mm.
And that was a huge challenge that, I mean, eventually I lost. So even though he was slower after that, like, it was enough of a difference that I lost, whereas I wouldn't have before that.
And I got my deck down to like 10 cards. So the disruption at that point didn't matter and you just get far enough ahead. That's the biggest difference. It buys you the time. And then so you still need to find a support every turn. You need to churn through that deck, churn. But it buys you time. The HP and the basicness is really the difference maker. It has like almost a Whale Lord HP that you can play around. But on a basic is
Yeah.
pretty huge.
And it will be a win for fighting if people start teching for it. Like, people start recognizing fighting as a threat might be the thing. But like, I've got Dragonite Fast Call over there. I go and get Arvin. I go and I get Enhanced Hammer. The Okidogi's already been hit by a Drampa. It's got 170 marked on it. And I just go Enhanced Hammer, get rid of the dark. It KOs your Okidogi. The next Pokemon gets promoted, and then I KO it again. Like, whatever that, and I can take 2 prizes in a turn. So once we start doing those things, like once we recognize Okidogi as a threat, I don't think it's going to be that big of a threat because Silent Lab is already really good against the format. So playing Silent Lab is going to be key in a lot of different decks. Hex Maniac sees a lot of play. And again, if it's got that damage marked on it, it's only 130. If it's got that damage marked on it, you can kill it with a Hex and you can take a second KO. So again, I think once fighting gets to a point to where we care, we'll stop caring because we'll be playing those cards, which are already good against a lot of other decks in the format.
Should definitely play Silent Lab. That should go up. Enhanced Hammer, I'm not completely sure about. But I'll say on the fighting side, by playing those HP or damage reducing tools, that makes a big difference because then you don't have to do 130. Even if you take away my ability, you still have to do 180, and that's not nothing either. So, like the Drampa, for example, hitting for 160, it's like, well, I'm still alive. You hexed me, but I'm still alive. You silent lab me, but I'm still alive.
Mhm,
So if you make them have to have that in the field blower, so I think that's really important for the builds is to have like at least two of those kind of tools.
mhm.
That makes it where you're buffed up as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I'm and in my Okidogi build, I'm already slotting in Chaotic Swell because I'm expecting Silent Lab to be something that people want to bring in against me. I'm kind of like already pre-preparing for the meta. And that's at least how I see it going. So again, I'm gonna say overhyped card is Okidogi. Again, I'm gonna say the card's busted. The card is very good. Fighting isn't ready for it. Like is what I'm trying to get at. Like it's so good that fighting just isn't ready to utilize it to its maximum potential.
So I think the difference too, you're in the weeds, you know the fighting. For me, it's the first time it's ever felt pretty good. So I'm just like, I'm so excited. I'm like, I think I have a good fighting deck now. What is this goes into it a little bit, but what do you think is the best? Because for me, I think that's the best card in the set. What do you think is the best card in the set? Would that be the Zapdos or the Walking Week for you?
No, I mean, I still think Okidogi is the best card in the entire set.
Okay.
Don't think me wrong. Like I'm gonna say that Okidogi, like single, like if you look at that card in a vacuum, Okidogi I think is the best card in the set. 170 for 2 energy with 230 HP on a basic is absolutely busted. So is it gonna be impactful? Was what I was getting at. And I think as far as like impact, like Zapdos slots into a proven deck that's already doing well. Walking Wake slots into a deck that's already doing well. So those are cards I see being played and getting more results. Whereas Okidogi, I see like we're still going to be struggling to kind of find the best build, and it's still just going to be a while before someone puts up like really good, consistent results for it. That's what I'm saying. So.
Also, I will say though, Hitmon Bros has been putting up consistent results, and it does slot into that.
It does, and I do think that that's the best place for Okidogi as like an alternative route to this spread games. And again, people have been winning with Hitmon Bros left and right. So play Hitmon
Yeah,
Bros. It's
yeah,
also
that
the
deck is hot right now. That is like the hottest deck I'd say right now is Hitmon Bros.
yeah, it just won Full Grip Games League. Andre Costella just won his league with it. It's recently won the Async League like finals. I think it's just a deck you have to play. And like once you've played it, X amount of times, you figure out the lines, you figure out when you need to pivot, you figure out like how many times you actually need to Hitmonchan before you go into Hitmonlee. Like there's definitely like a lot of nuance and you got to figure it out. And like once you like realize like, hey, I can go get Silent Lab and do this, like the plays and the lines become clear, and then you just you wreck setup decks, and everyone's playing setup decks. So you're like, please play Water and Grass. I got you.
Those kind of decks that require those nuances, they're the most fun to play too, because it rewards all the hours that you pour into them.
Oh yeah, you're definitely going to be thinking and working harder than every single one of your opponents. So if you like that, it's like a puzzle. Like you're doing a puzzle, and your opponent is playing checkers. Sometimes one of them is easier. All right, that's it. We got some shout outs here. PokeCon's coming up. So the Baltimore PokeCon. This is the third one, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys, this is going on June 29th and 30th. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so there's only 64 slots for the day one for GLC. So be careful because the time's coming up. So make sure you get your slot. You can sign up online before that signs up. The first day, so on Saturday, it's a typical kind of tournament. Whoever does the best with each type gets a badge for their type, and then there's the overall winner. The prizing for first is Full Art Cynthia and Caitlin. For second to fourth, there's all kinds of different cool full arts, Hex Maniac, and Iono, just like some of the iconic cards that are the bling you want to have into your deck. Um, and the cost of entry isn't that much because once you get into the event, that's the like I'd say bigger cost, but it's still not that expensive to get a ticket, and that lets you get into the TCG, the cosplay, all the vendors, and just part of the convention itself, which I think is cool because that's like what a lot of regionals are. A lot of
Mhm.
regionals these days are Pokemon conventions, but the cost of entry to that is actually not cheap. It's like $70. I guess for a spectator it's 10, but then you don't get to play. This you actually get to play and you can do the cosplay, you can do the Pokemon, you can do all of it. You can bring your kids. I found a picture from a year ago where Ray had our first kid sitting in her lap while we're playing. GLC people are super chill. That probably doesn't get talked about enough. So if you have a kid and you just need to take a break and be like, I trust you. Hold on, let me just put them down for a second. So it's a way that you can like just play just cool heads up Pokemon. It's a fun way to do it. Sunday, we're gonna do standard as the main event, but we're gonna do a conquest event for GLC. So you can bring 5 different decks with you, and then you will battle to. Once you win with your deck, you have to check it off. You can't play it again. The first person that wins with all 5 types is the winner. So maybe someone is busted. Maybe Weeder shows up and just gets all 5 right away. With all of his different 5 versions of Leviathan that he figures out by then. No one's playing Lost Vacuum. Uh, but I'm really excited. I think that's going to be a fun format. There's been a lot more conquest than Pokemon on standard, and I think it's a neat way to do it in GLC where types are so important.
Yeah.
Am I missing anything?
I think so.
I'll be casting it, so we'll be streaming it if you can't come. The stream will be from 12 to 6. The event starts at 10:30. It'll be not just myself, but also Team Fish Knuckles, he's an old head. He's been doing the YouTube stuff for like 10 years, I think. And he moved to us, and we're very fortunate he's going to be casting it with us.
Nice. Wish I lived closer so I could come there.
You
Baltimore's
just
only
gotta
like
move on up.
I think it's like an 8 hour drive. So maybe one of these days, maybe.
Baltimore is utopia. It's the safest place. Great healthcare. Just come on up. Come on up.
Sounds
Everyone's trying to come up to Baltimore.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, safest place in the universe.
sounds a lot better than the Columbia, South Carolina. Although I do love Columbia.
Oh
so.
yeah.
All right,
Who
another
wants all
shout
that
out.
nice weather?
Well, it's a
Look
little
at it,
hot
man.
sometimes. But Z-Man,
I got it.
you got some codes for us. What's up?
I got to give a huge shout out to Darkside Games for sponsoring us. Mentioned this in the last one, but we definitely don't do this for the money, but just because we love the game and to support it. And this is a really cool thing they do, where if you type in Z-Man into their search bar, it pulls up all the cards tonight that we talked about and recommended. So I'm not just like adding it to the cart for you, but if you think any of these are interesting, you can click on them. If you think some of them are fake, like maybe you're like, okie dokie, I don't believe in it, I'm gonna leave that on my cart just because I want to pull a statement. You can do that. Another important part is you get 15% off your order if you put in Z-Man 15, which is amazing because the prices are just market prices. It's the same as if you go to like TCG players. So 15% is actually really significant for Pokemon singles. And in my opinion, you should only buy Pokemon singles. Buying packs is kind of like gambling and not worth it. So a huge shout out to Darkside Games for believing in the format. I think they're ahead of the game in terms of card shops looking at GLC, since we're not technically a recognized format. Huge props to them. And just like I say, as I've gotten to know them over a month now, just really awesome, down to earth people who play the game and do all this for the right reasons. So check out Darkside Games. Type in Z-Man to find the cards we talked about tonight, and then Z-Man 15 for 15% off your order. I would include Z-Man and Waffles 15, but that's a little too long for marketing. So these 6 characters are a better way to do the code.
Yeah. And I'll say after I'm not sponsored by Darkside Games at all, but after we had our stream, I went on there, found myself a couple staple cards, got myself a Galarian Zapdos full art as well. Used your code, got some off, and like the next 2 to 3 days, it was here. So shout out to them. Even on top of this, great customer service, and they had most of what I needed. It's very hard to find everything you need from a single place when it comes to GLC, just because the cards are ridiculously old. You got like 11 years worth of cards to look at, but they had most of what I needed, and some pretty good staples here and there too. So big shout out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of the Let Loose podcast. Again, a podcast dedicated to all things GLC in the Pokemon TCG. Ray and Zach, it was great to have you both on. Thank you again.
Thanks for having us. We failed our 4-hour mark, which is good. I don't think we were going to survive. It's 11:30 if you're watching this in your car when you're commuting, like I typically do for podcasts. We'll give you a 4-hour one the next time, I promise.
Well,
no, you'll die.
3 hours is enough. I've got a lot of editing to do. But with that being said, it's time to head to bed. Everyone, have a wonderful night, and we'll see you back next week for more Let Loose.